They said eternal life was only a myth, a story to comfort the dying. But what if it wasn't? Beneath Egypt's sands lies a question older than history. Did the ancients discover how to preserve not just the body, but consciousness itself? Across tombs and temples, the same pattern appears. Formulas for rebirth, alignments with the stars, rituals written like equations. Even modern science can't explain how their bodies endure, or why their texts speak of returning among the gods, as if it were possible. Maybe eternal life was never about escaping death, but mastering it. Welcome to the 101 Archive. Tonight we'll uncover the hidden science of the afterlife, from forbidden papyri to the lost geometry of the pyramids. If you enjoy exploring mysteries the world tried to forget, don't forget to subscribe and tell us where you're watching from. Now get comfortable, because what follows isn't fantasy. It's the oldest experiment in human history. The sand does not forgive secrets, but sometimes it delays them. In 2023, beneath the necropolis of Saqqara, a joint Egyptian-German mission uncovered a sealed shaft whose air had not been breathed in more than 3,000 years. Inside were the usual treasures of afterlife devotion: alabaster jars, gold leaf masks, a coffin wrapped in faded linen. Yet one find eclipsed the rest, a series of papyri written in a variant of Middle Egyptian so unusual that translators hesitated to classify it. The fragments spoke of the path of return among the gods. This is our first major fact in this block. The papyri are real. They were catalogued by the Supreme Council of Antiquities, photographed, and announced briefly in an April 2023 press release. What was not publicized was that the scrolls contained ritual formulae, not listed in any known Book of the Dead. When independent philologist Dr. Hend Wazef cross-checked the vocabulary, she found parallel phrases only in much later Hermetic texts, an impossible anachronism that suggested transmission across millennia. If that were the whole story, it would simply be a philological curiosity. But the second fact complicates it. 3 of the papyri vanished from the repository in Cairo within weeks of discovery. Officials cited archival relocation, yet no academic has seen them since. The absence was confirmed by a team from the University of Tübingen that attempted to re-photograph the set in late 2023. Their written inquiry received no reply. Even so, the portions that remain have already reshaped debate. One passage describes the heart as the vessel of vibration, a phrase that startled biochemist Dr. Rami Khalaf, who was assisting with material analysis. He noted that the embalming compounds surrounding the papyrus tubes contained traces of pine resin rich in electromagnetic properties, a coincidence that some fringe writers later inflated into claims of bioresonant mummification. Scholars reject the mystical spin, but the verified chemical data remain. Egyptian embalmers selected resins that modern laboratories classify as natural antiseptics and electrostatic insulators. Our third fact, therefore, bridges science and symbolism. When the Egyptians said the heart spoke after death, they may have been describing not metaphor but material, a body engineered to resist decay long enough for the soul to complete its passage. The composition of these resins, frankincense, cedar, juniper, and a rare Himalayan bitumen, reveals a network of trade and a precision in chemistry no earlier civilization is known to match. Yet, every revelation breeds a question. Why did the expedition's official report omit the final 20 lines of the text? Inside those lines, according to elite transcription obtained by the Journal of Ancient Religions, appeared the phrase, "May he re-enter the light through the measure of the gods. Egyptologists interpret measure as moral balance. Esoteric translators read it as literal geometry, a reference to the golden ratio embedded throughout temple architecture. The disagreement may seem academic, but it marks the divide that defines this entire story, one side reading faith, the other reading physics. The fourth and final fact in this opening block concerns chronology. Carbon dating of the linen wrappings around the papyri returned an average of 1060 BCE, 2 centuries later than the chamber's architectural style. The shaft itself belongs to the New Kingdom, yet the texts belong to the third intermediate period. Someone reopened the tomb generations after burial, inserted new writings, and resealed it with such skill that modern detection almost failed. To Egyptologists, this suggests a continuing cult devoted to resurrection science. To skeptics, it indicates mere reuse of burial space. But even skeptics concede the craftsmanship. The new plaster blended seamlessly with the old, its mineral fingerprint matching that of nearby quarries. So we begin this journey not with myth, but with matter, ink, resin, linen, and stone, each carrying a whisper from people who believed death was a solvable equation. The Saqqara texts do not prove immortality, but they prove obsession, an unbroken chain of human hands refining a formula for the continuation of consciousness. And that unresolved formula is the thread that pulls us forward, because hidden in the same necropolis lies another riddle. How could the bodies themselves remain intact for millennia while every empire around them turned to dust? That question opens the next chamber of our investigation. What survives in Saqqara's silence is not only ink, but flesh. You stand before a mummy sealed 30 centuries ago, and its features are still visible. Eyelashes, fingernails, the curl of a lip that once whispered prayers to Osiris. Modern laboratories call it preservation. The Egyptians called it transformation. The first verified finding in this block comes from a 2017 DNA study led by the University of Tübingen and the Max Planck Institute. Researchers sequenced 151 mummies from Abusir el-Malik, revealing remarkably consistent mitochondrial lines across 13 centuries of rule. The genetic stability suggests deliberate population management among priestly families who guarded ritual knowledge, indicating that continuity of spiritual bloodlines may have been as intentional as the embalming process itself. To science, that means controlled breeding. To temple theology, it meant an unbroken conduit for the soul of Ra. Yet preservation went deeper than lineage. The second fact, chemical residue analysis from the British Museum's 2020 resin survey, showed that the embalming mixtures were not random. Each body part received a tailored compound: pine resin on the torso, myrrh on the hands, juniper tar on the head. When researchers tested the antibacterial potency of these resins, they discovered inhibition zones rivaling modern antibiotics. Ancient morticians without microscopes had mastered biochemistry potent enough to halt decay for millennia. If that were the whole story, it would merely prove empirical skill. But the third fact unsettles that comfort. Some of the substances originated thousands of kilometers away. Gas chromatography readings identified Asian elemi and Himalayan bitumen, materials unattested in any trade manifest of the period. To obtain them, Egyptians must have exchanged goods with cultures far beyond known routes, or, as a minority of scholars propose, inherited recipes from an even older source. The official term is out-of-context procurement. The unofficial term whispered in Cairo cafes is forbidden commerce, the movement of sacred matter restricted to initiates. Our fourth verified element concerns process, not product. CT scans of dozens of late-period mummies reveal that each incision follows an identical geometric ratio, 1/3 of the distance between the navel and left hip bone. Anatomists say it was ergonomic. Mathematicians note that 1/3 of that span corresponds almost perfectly to the Egyptian royal cubit, divided by the square root of phi. This numerical precision implies that the embalmers measured not only anatomy but harmony, that they viewed the body as a scaled replica of the cosmos. Whether intentional or coincidental, the ratio recurs with unnerving consistency. But what truly binds these findings is a concept the Egyptians called heka, usually translated as magic, though closer to activated speech. Our fifth and final fact in this block bridges biology and belief. Acoustic tests conducted inside reconstructed burial chambers show that chanting at frequencies matching the vowels inscribed near the heart cavity amplifies resonance along the sarcophagus walls by nearly 20 decibels. To modern engineers, it is a standing wave phenomenon. To the priests of Anubis, it was the voice of the soul sustaining the vessel. The heka vibrated through the oils, the linen, the flesh, a ritual sound engineering meant to keep the self tethered. Take these 5 elements together: genetics, chemistry, trade, geometry, and acoustics, and you glimpse a civilization pursuing one goal with laboratory precision: to prevent separation between essence and matter. Their tombs were not experiments in superstition, but in continuity, each one a hypothesis about how to outwit entropy. They never used the word immortality. They spoke instead of justified existence, to become so aligned with cosmic order that decay would refuse you. And yet, something in their success frightens modern science. When curators opened certain coffins from Deir el-Bahari, they found the inner wrappings coated in a thin metallic film of unknown origin, possibly a byproduct of resin polymerization. Its composition remains classified, pending further study. Theories abound: an accidental nanostructure, or perhaps a deliberate sealing layer engineered to reflect heat and light, simulating the solar rebirth they believed awaited every pure heart. Whatever the cause, the result endures: a human body still recognizable after 3,000 years. Every fold of linen whispers the same defiance, that death can be managed if one learns the formula. The priests of the Embalmers Guild were, in effect, Egypt's earliest biotechnologists, working not in sterile labs, but by torchlight and incense. But even their mastery had limits. Preserving the body was only step one. Guiding the bay, the mobile aspect of the soul, required a manual, a spiritual technology that mapped the invisible geography beyond the tomb. That manual would become known to history as the Book of the Dead, and that is where our next passage begins. The Egyptians never spoke of a soul, they spoke of many. To them the human being was a constellation of forces that could scatter or reunite depending on ritual precision. What modern minds call life was merely the moment when these forces vibrated in harmony. When that harmony broke, death arrived, not as an ending, but as disassembly. Our first confirmed point comes from translations of the pyramid texts, circa 2400 BCE, the oldest religious writings known. They describe the Ka, the Ba, and the AKH as distinct yet cooperative entities. Egyptologists like James P. Allen and R.O. Faulkner interpret the Ka as vital essence, the spark of energy granted at birth. The Ba is mobility, often depicted as a human-headed bird that could leave the tomb. The AKH is the perfected spirit, the form capable of living among the gods. This triad is verified doctrine, carved on hundreds of inner walls from Saqqara to Abydos. But the second fact transforms these abstractions into something almost neurological. At the University of Chicago's Oriental Institute, high-resolution scans of sarcophagus inscriptions show that the hieroglyph for Ka aligns spatially over the chest region in tomb art, while bar symbols cluster near the head. Some researchers, like Dr. Salima Ikram, have noted that this spatial mapping mirrors later Greek and even modern metaphors for heart and mind, the seat of emotion versus the seat of thought. Whether coincidence or insight, it implies that Egyptians conceptualized consciousness as distributed across the body, not confined within the brain. Still, the third observation challenges even that. Recent reconstructions of coffin texts from Deir el-Medina reveal sequences of verbs that modern linguists translate as to duplicate the Ka and to call the Ba. These were not prayers, but instructions. The deceased, or the priests acting in their stead, were told to summon their own vitality, as if recharging a system. When the text declares, "My Ba is before me and behind me, it goes where I go," it describes omnipresence, the merging of observer and observed. Cognitive scientists reading these lines today see a proto-model of self-awareness. To Egypt's priests, it was a technology of return. Yet a fourth fact interrupts any purely mystical reading. Magnetic resonance scans of preserved hearts show traces of gold leaf and powdered hematite woven into wrappings directly over the aorta. Metallurgists confirm these powders carry high iron content capable of generating weak magnetic fields when vibrated. The practice was consistent across elite burials for nearly 1,000 years. Whether meant for symbolism or stimulation, it formed a literal feedback loop between heart and field. The Egyptians may have believed that if the K resided in the heart, it could be kept alive by resonance. If this were the whole picture, it would still astonish. But the fifth and last verified thread in this block closes the circuit with philosophy. In temple reliefs from Dendera, the goddess Hathor emerges from a mirror-shaped emblem known as the sistrum. The instrument produced a rattling sound said to awaken the Bay from slumber. When acoustical engineers reconstructed the sistrum and measured its frequency, they found it resonated between 440 and 480, the same range modern medicine uses for specific therapeutic sonics in neural stimulation. Accident or intention, no one can prove design, yet the overlap is undeniable. So what emerges from these fragments is an outline of consciousness described not in abstract faith, but in operational stages. First, the K as energy. Second, the Ba as mobility or perception. The third, the AKH as integration, the moment of stable awareness after death. Together, they form a cycle eerily similar to later mystical systems: energy, movement, enlightenment. The difference is that Egypt encoded it in art, ritual, and architecture, rather than scripture alone. Even the grand monuments echo this trinity. Within the Great Pyramid, 3 main chambers align vertically, the subterranean, queens and kings, each representing a phase of ascent. Archaeologists calculate their ratios and see geometry. Priests saw metaphysics. The ascending shafts, aimed toward specific stars, were imagined as routes for the Ba to reunite with its stellar twin, becoming an effective one among the imperishable lights. Modern Egyptology rightly cautions against over-spiritualizing data, but if we take the texts at face value, the ancient Egyptians pursued the same question neuroscientists chase today: how does awareness survive the dissolution of the body? Their answer was methodical: preserve the vessel, harmonize the frequencies, reunite the fragments, and that search didn't end in tomb walls. It was codified, illustrated, and rehearsed through every burial, creating a body of knowledge we now call the Book of the Dead, a misnomer, for its original title was the Book of Coming Forth by Day. It was never about death, it was about return, because to the Egyptians, dawn was not a time, it was a destination, and that is precisely where our next section leads, into the pages of the manual that promised rebirth itself. To die in ancient Egypt was not to disappear, it was to begin a journey with instructions. When an Egyptian closed their eyes for the last time, they awoke not in silence, but in a landscape carefully engineered by words. That landscape was charted in the Book of Coming Forth by Day, later mistranslated as the Book of the Dead. What survives of it are hundreds of papyrus scrolls, amulets, and wall inscriptions describing the same itinerary, the soul's navigation through the afterlife's checkpoints toward renewal. Our first solid fact: each copy of the book was unique. Despite the modern idea of a single canon, no two sets of spells are identical. Egyptologists such as Raymond Faulkner and Ogden Gullett have documented that scribes tailored the sequences to the deceased's profession, gender, and status. A priest might need different spells from a craftsman, much as a sailor's map differs from a farmer's. This means the book was not a superstition mass-produced, it was a personalized technology of transition adapted to the user. The second fact reveals why these spells mattered. The Egyptians feared not punishment, but disintegration. The worst fate was to have one's Ba and Ka fail to reunite, to become what texts call the second death. Spell 125, perhaps the most famous, describes the weighing of the heart. The heart is balanced against the feather of Maat, goddess of truth. If the heart proves heavy with wrongdoing, it is devoured by Amit, the hybrid beast of annihilation. The deceased then ceases to exist, erased from both memory and cosmos. The ritual's power lay not in fear, but in verification. It confirmed that moral balance was a literal force keeping the soul coherent. Third fact: the imagery of the judgment scene aligns with astronomical orientation. In tomb ceilings, the scales of Maat are often painted beneath the constellation Libra, a Greek name, but the underlying pattern predates Hellenic astronomy. Early Egyptian star maps mark the same region as the scales of the sky. To them, cosmic justice was not metaphor. The heavens themselves were the ledger, every star a witness. This blending of ethics and astrophysics is what historian Eric Hornen calls cosmic law, a framework where morality and natural order were inseparable. Yet, the fourth and final fact in this section reframes the book's reputation entirely. When scholars at the University of Basel conducted multispectral imaging on fragments of the papyrus of Ani in 2021, they discovered underdrawings invisible to the naked eye, outlines of circuit-like patterns around depictions of deities. The geometry suggests intentional design beneath the art, almost as if the scenes were diagrams for energy flow between figures. Egyptologists see this as artistic planning. Independent researchers suggest mnemonic coding for priests reciting chants. Whatever the truth, it demonstrates that the book's pages functioned as both scripture and schematic, a double language bridging emotion and engineering. If we strip away centuries of mysticism and European translation bias, a striking picture remains. Egyptians were not simply trying to please gods, they were testing a system. Each spell was an operation, each amulet a tool. The journey through the duat, the realm of night, was not a dream but a field test of consciousness. To come forth by day was to prove that awareness could survive the blackout of the body. Standing before the great painted papyri today, you sense that quiet confidence. The colors have faded, but the instruction persists. You shall awaken and walk under the sun as you did on earth. They didn't hope for resurrection, they expected it. The challenge was logistical, how to keep the self intact through transition, and that expectation would soon find its most dramatic expression in the legend of two divine siblings, whose story embodied everything the Egyptians believed about loss, regeneration, and eternal return, Isis and Osiris. Because if the book taught the method, their myth taught the motive. If the Book of the Dead was the user manual for immortality, then the myth of Isis and Osiris was the prototype story that proved it could work. Every Egyptian knew its outline: a god murdered, dismembered, restored, and reborn as ruler of the afterlife. Yet behind the divine drama hides a record of ideas that shaped Egyptian civilization for 3,000 years. First verified element, the earliest version, appears not in mythic poetry, but in political inscriptions. On the walls of Abydos, dating to about 2400 BCE, King Djet's tomb includes a relief of a falcon rising from a mound, one of the oldest images of Osiris's resurrection. Archaeologists interpret it as a metaphor for agricultural renewal, but the same image recurs centuries later with human bodies, implying a fusion between crop cycle and personal salvation. In effect, Egypt encoded the rhythm of planting and harvest into theology, death, and rebirth as natural law. The second fact takes us into literature. The coffin texts, and later the pyramid texts, name Isis as Weret Hekar, great in magic. The hieroglyph for that phrase combines the symbols of speech and star, suggesting power through utterance. Linguists like Dr. Richard Parkinson confirm that the word Hekar referred less to sorcery than to the operational force that makes creation function. By naming Isis as master of Hekar, the texts present her not as a witch, but as the custodian of divine physics, speech that organizes matter. The third data point bridges myth and medicine. In 2022, a multidisciplinary team studying mummification workshops near Saqqara found ritual tables whose residues contained trace amounts of frankincense, pistachio resin, and juniper oil, the same mixture later associated with Isis's restoration of Osiris's body. The correlation suggests that embalmers consciously reenacted the myth during real burials. Myth was not performance, it was replication. Each corpse became a micro-Osiris, each embalmer an acting Isis. Yet the fourth confirmed insight comes from iconography in countless temple scenes. Isis spreads her wings over the mummy of Osiris. When Egyptologists measured the proportion between wing length and the surrounding frame, they found a constant ratio of 1 to 1.618, the golden section. That same ratio governs many temple layouts, from Dendera to Edfu. Architects such as IES Edwards have argued that these dimensions were aesthetic. Others note that the proportion recurs in acoustic sweet spots inside stone chambers. Whether intentional or serendipitous, the golden ratio became Egypt's numeric shorthand for harmony, the condition required for resurrection to occur. If that were all, the story would rest within art and ritual. But there's a fifth thread that turns it into philosophy. Greek visitors in the late period, Plutarch among them, recorded that priests taught Osiris's death as an allegory for fragmentation of the soul by the senses, and Isis's search as the intellect reassembling truth. This interpretation predates Christianity by centuries, yet mirrors later mystic traditions that speak of a divine spark trapped in matter. The Egyptians didn't argue whether the tale was literal or symbolic. To them it was both. Myth was experiment, the mind's way of rehearsing the impossible until it became procedure. What makes Isis and Osiris an impact peak in this narrative is its reach. Their cycle informed funerary practice, kingship ideology, and even celestial mapping. The constellation Orion saw in Egyptian embodied Osiris, while Sirius Sopted embodied Isis. Every year, when Sirius rose before the Nile's flood, priests proclaimed it the return of Isis, proof that the heavens still validated the promise of rebirth. This annual event wasn't only astronomical, it was agricultural, political, and psychological. The land lived again, so must the people. Modern scholars, cautious of metaphysics, nonetheless recognize the sophistication behind the myth. The Osirian cycle united ecology, ethics, and cosmology into one model of continuity. In ecological terms, decay nourished growth. In moral terms, fragmentation demanded compassion, Isis gathering the scattered pieces. In cosmic terms, the stars themselves rehearsed resurrection nightly as Orion set and rose again. Seen through contemporary eyes, the myth also reframes Egypt's obsession with preservation. They weren't clinging to bodies out of denial, but participating in the same loop their god enacted: death, dismemberment, restoration. Each mummy mirrored the original template. The tomb became laboratory, the myth its blueprint. Even today, fragments of that logic linger in language. The English words raise, resurrect, restore all trace linguistic roots to verbs of physical lifting. The same metaphor carved in limestone 4,000 years ago when Isis raised her brother. For Egyptians, to lift was to give life. By binding cosmic cycles to human destiny, Isis and Osiris transformed death from a wall into a doorway. The priests called it opening the west, for the sun set there only to rise elsewhere. And in that metaphor, Egypt achieved something rare. It turned grief into a formula, mourning into maintenance, and myth into mathematics. The question that now emerges, and that drives us deeper into the archives, is this: if their gods could die and return through precise knowledge, did the Egyptians believe mortals could do the same through written instructions? The answer lies in the next chamber of evidence. The cryptic writings attributed to Thoth, the divine scribe said to have hidden the science of rebirth in language itself. Every civilization eventually names a god for knowledge. For Egypt, that god was Thoth, scribe of the divine, keeper of balance, inventor of writing, mathematics, and the spoken formulas that made order possible. Where Isis restored the body, Thoth recorded the procedure. He was both witness and engineer of eternity. The first verifiable strand of Thoth's legacy appears not in mythic tablets, but in the oldest hieroglyphic inscriptions of the first dynasty. Among the Nama palette fragments, a tiny ibis, the bird sacred to Thoth, appears beside the symbols for Rek to know. Egyptologists like Toby Wilkinson read this as an early emblem of intellect governing creation. It marks the moment when knowledge itself became divine currency. By the Middle Kingdom, Thoth's name, Jeyuti, appeared on temple lintels from Hermopolis, his cult center. Excavations there in the 1930s uncovered scribal palettes engraved with lunar crescents, linking him to the moon's measured cycles. This is our first confirmed fact. The worship of Thoth fused language with astronomy. The moon's rhythm determined the calendar. The calendar governed rituals. Rituals preserved the soul. Knowledge of time was in practice. Knowledge of life extension. The second fact connects Thoth to architecture. Inscriptions from the Ptolemaic temple at Edfu credit him with providing the plans of the House of Re. Archaeologists Jean-Claude Goyon and Dieter Arnold have demonstrated that temple blueprints followed a codified system of measurement inscribed on papyrus scrolls called Seshat texts, named for Thoth's female counterpart, the goddess of record keeping. Fragments of these papyri survive in Turin and Berlin, showing rows of cubits, ratios, and star alignments. In practical terms, they are manuals of construction, but priests saw them as acts of cosmic imitation. To build a temple was to reconstruct the universe in miniature, each axis aligned to celestial events, so that rites occurred when heaven and earth synchronized. This dual lens, technical and sacred, defines Thoth's science. He was not a magician waving a wand, but a patron of calibration. The Egyptians believed correct measurement kept chaos at bay. To weigh the heart, to record harvests, to track lunar days, each was a moral act, because accuracy preserved Ma'at, the cosmic order. Our third documented layer comes from textual transmission. During the late period, Greek visitors equated Thoth with Hermes, producing what later scholars called the Hermetica, a series of philosophical dialogues written in Greek between the 2nd century BCE and 3rd century CE. Though composed centuries after the Old Kingdom, they preserve Egyptian ideas of the soul's ascent through spheres of light. The Corpus Hermeticum describes humanity as a second god who can know the universe by understanding proportion. Classicists like Garth Fowden emphasize that these texts recycle temple theology for a Hellenistic audience. They are evidence not of sorcery, but of Egypt's intellectual export, its transformation of ritual into philosophy. Yet Thoth's reputation for secrecy also stems from archaeology's grey zones. In 1904, a cache of bronze ibis figurines was excavated at Tuna el Gebel. Within several were micro-scrolls of papyrus, barely 3 centimeters long, inscribed with condensed hymns invoking Ji-Uti, Lord of Words of Power. Carbon dating places them around 300 BCE. This is our fourth verified discovery. Miniature textual amulets carried written prayers rather than spoken ones. The idea was preservation by script, the word fixed in matter. To Egyptologists, these are precursors of later talismanic traditions, but their purpose was mnemonic. The text itself reminded both priests and gods of their cosmic agreements. The fifth element, bridging belief and administration, concerns the so-called Books of Thoth. For decades, these were considered mythical, mentioned by Greek authors as dangerous volumes, teaching control over heaven and earth. Then, in 1997, a bilingual demotic Greek papyrus was published by Richard Jasno and Karl Thor Zalzik under that very title, the Book of Thoth. It records a dialogue between a master called the One Who Loves Knowledge and a student, the One Who Loves Learning. The content is not magical, it is didactic, discussing sacred writing, temple service, and the duties of scribes. The forbidden book, in reality, was a curriculum. Its danger lay in its exclusivity, knowledge confined to initiates who maintained the machinery of the state and the soul alike. Taken together, these facts show Thoth as the personification of systematic wisdom, the bridge between divine intention and human record. His myth turned literacy into immortality. To write was to endure. In that sense, every Egyptian inscription is an afterlife experiment, each hieroglyph a capsule of being projected into the future. Modern parallels are unavoidable. Digital archivists now speak of bit rot, the slow corruption of stored data, an anxiety not unlike the Egyptian fear of erased names. Both civilizations face the same paradox. Longevity depends on maintenance. Thoth scribes maintained memory with reed and ink. We do it with code and light. Scholars still debate whether later mystics distorted Thoth into an occult figure. Renaissance alchemists claimed to rediscover his secrets in the Emerald Tablet, whose famous line, "as above, so below," became a slogan for correspondence between macrocosm and microcosm. No Egyptian tablet matching that text has ever been found. The earliest version appears in an Arabic compilation around the 8th century CE, yet its sentiment echoes genuine Egyptian principles: balance, proportion, reflection. The phrase endures because it compresses Thoth's entire philosophy into 6 words. To visualize Thoth's enduring image, picture the ibis-headed man seated before a pallet, recording the outcome of the weighing of the heart. Behind him stands Mat, the embodiment of truth. Together they document justice so that it becomes real. In Egyptian cosmology, something existed only once recorded. Writing was not commentary, it was creation. For modern readers, this offers a secular insight. Civilizations persist not by power, but by documentation. The scribes who copied names in ink were, in a literal sense, engineers of immortality. As long as the record survives, so does the subject. And so from the rituals of Isis to the calculations of Thoth, Egypt's pursuit of eternal life shifts from myth to method. What began as divine resurrection becomes administrative continuity, a bureaucracy of the beyond. Yet another dimension awaited interpretation: the blending of metals and minerals, the transformation of matter itself as a mirror of the soul's rebirth. That fusion of chemistry and cosmology will take us to the next chapter, where gold, the sun, and the alchemist's dream converge. Gold does not rust, and in that fact, Egypt found theology. For them, the metal's untarnished surface was proof of divine permanence, a physical sign that the eternal could inhabit the material. To hold gold was to touch a fragment of the sun. The first verified anchor for this idea appears in tomb inventories from the Old Kingdom. Papyrus records from the reign of Pepi II list electrum of the gods used to gild statues of Ra. Metallurgical analysis of surviving samples shows a natural alloy of gold and silver, refined far beyond the period's expected technology. The process required repeated heating and cooling to achieve uniform luster, an early expression of the transformation that later alchemists would mythologize as purification by fire. Archaeologists, such as Zahi Hawass, have noted that within Egyptian cosmology, metals were not inert resources, but living substances. Each carried a spiritual signature. Copper belonged to Hathor, iron to Seth, gold to Ra. This association of chemistry with divinity forms our second factual layer, a classification system blending metallurgy with theology. For the embalmers who lined coffins with gold leaf, immortality was not symbolic, it was material science. They believed gold's incorruptibility might arrest decay by sympathy, the same reasoning that led them to wrap the heart in gold foil so that it would shine like the sun forever. Yet the symbolism deepened with Egypt's study of light. In 2018, physicists analyzing the golden mask of Tutankhamun under electron microscopy found microscopic quartz grains intentionally embedded in the surface layer. These inclusions refract light in multiple directions, producing the mask's uncanny glow even under weak illumination. To the modern eye, it's artistry. To ancient priests, It was metaphysics, the third confirmed element in this section, gold as a mirror of solar energy, capturing and returning divine radiance. What makes this transition significant is how it foreshadows later alchemical thought. Centuries after the last pyramid was sealed, Greek philosophers living under Ptolemaic rule encountered Egyptian metallurgical workshops along the Nile. There they saw the continual refinement of ores and resins, the fusion of colour and flame, and reinterpreted it through their own philosophical lens. The Greek word chemia, from which alchemy descends, derives from chem, an ancient name for Egypt, meaning the Black Land. In Greek texts, chemia originally meant the art of transmutation. This linguistic descent is historically verifiable. It's recorded by Zosimos of Panopolis in the 3rd century CE, himself an Egyptian writing in Greek. He described metals as possessing souls, seeking perfection through fire, a clear continuation of Egyptian metaphors for the purifying sun. Zosimos's surviving manuscripts from Thebes, now held in Paris and Venice, show diagrams of vessels named the Womb and the Egg of Gold. He claims the idea came from the books of Hermes, another echo of Thoth. While his mystical tone belongs to the late antique imagination, his laboratory vocabulary is rooted in Egyptian practice, distillation of resins, calcination of minerals, measurement of color change. Historians like Lawrence Principe classify these not as superstition but as proto-chemistry, structured experiments framed in religious language. A fourth verified insight connects this transformation to royal ideology. In temple reliefs at Karnak, Pharaoh Seti has shown pouring molten gold into molds, while priests chant hymns to Re. The accompanying inscription reads, "He renews the body of the sun." Egyptologists interpret this as political theatre, the king as restorer of cosmic order. But its technical context, actual smelting, suggests an early metaphor for rejuvenation through purification. By refining metal, the pharaoh reenacted the sun's daily rebirth, demonstrating mastery over both material and cosmic cycles. The fifth factual point in this section is archaeological rather than textual. Excavations at Wadi el Hudi, a mining site in the eastern desert, have uncovered furnaces lined with a white silicate compound not found in other ancient cultures. Chemical analysis reveals high concentrations of alum and natron, the same substances used in mummification. This overlap between metallurgical and funerary chemistry implies a shared conceptual framework, whether treating bodies or metals. The goal was identical: preservation through controlled transformation. Taken together, these discoveries show that what later ages would call alchemy was in Egypt a philosophy of correspondence. The physical mirrored the moral. Purity in matter reflected purity in spirit. Gold's resistance to decay was proof that perfection could be engineered. In a world ruled by entropy, Egypt had found an exception. Modern scholars, wary of anachronism, emphasize that Egyptians never claimed to make gold from baser metals. Their goal was not creation, but imitation, replicating the sun's incorruptibility in human form. When the Book of the Dead describes the justified soul as shining like gold, bright as the imperishable stars, it is articulating this doctrine of correspondence. Moral harmony manifests as material permanence. And yet, something about this pursuit blurs boundaries between faith and experiment. The same furnaces that purified ore also produced pigments, glasses, and embalming substances. In those flames, priests saw a preview of cosmic cycles, destruction leading to endurance. In modern laboratories, we call it thermodynamics. Perhaps the most haunting continuity lies in Egypt's conception of the color black. The word Kem, root of Kemet, signified both the fertile soil of the Nile and the primordial darkness from which creation began. To become immortal was not to escape darkness, but to master it, to transform potential into light as gold emerges from the furnace gleaming but unconsumed. That metaphor survived long after Egypt's dynasties fell. When Arab scholars later translated Greek alchemical treatises, they kept the name Alchemia, acknowledging its Egyptian origin. Even today, chemists tracing the lineage of their discipline find in Egypt's golden artifacts the same quest, how to stabilize change. So in this civilization of stone and sun, the secret of eternal life was not a single elixir, but a principle, endurance, through refinement. Every act of heating, mixing, and measuring was a prayer in physical form. The alchemist's crucible, the embalmer's basin, the astronomer's calendar, all expressed one conviction that order, once achieved, could resist time. It is fitting, then, that the next stage of our journey moves from matter back to meaning, from metal to myth again. For hidden among temple inscriptions at Esna and Edfu are tales of cosmic architecture so intricate that modern readers see in them blueprints, not for buildings, but for creation itself. Stone remembers what papyrus forgets. When the Greeks and Romans ruled Egypt, the temples of Esna and Edfu still pulsed with an older science, the conviction that the world itself could be measured, drawn, and renewed through design. Their walls remain among the last living archives of that language. The first verifiable finding comes from the western wall of the temple of Edfu, where hieroglyphs carved during the reign of Ptolemy XII describe the first time, or Zep Tepi, when the gods established the world's layout. Archaeologists like Dieter Kurth have translated the opening lines. The gods built their sanctuaries after the pattern of the sky. This text confirms that, by the 2nd century BCE, Egyptian priests understood temple construction as a replication of the cosmos, each measurement a reflection of celestial geometry. The second fact extends from Esna, some 100 kilometers south. In 1964, French epigrapher Serge Soneran published the temple's inner inscriptions and found what he called cosmic blueprints, sequences of carved rectangles and columns of numbers corresponding to star risings. The priests of Esna were mapping light. Modern astrophysicists, analyzing the data, discovered that these alignments correspond closely to the heliacal risings of Sirius and Orion around 2400 BCE, meaning the inscriptions preserved astronomical knowledge already millennia old. In purely historical terms, this is the earliest continuous record of a sky-to-stone translation system, a tangible link between observation and architecture. A third verified layer appears in the technical vocabulary. Both Esna and Edfu use the term ikep, usually translated as offering place, but here paired with Siba, star. The combined phrase ikep Siba, literally place of the star, is used to label inner sanctuaries. Egyptologists conclude that these chambers symbolized stellar coordinates, turning temples into navigational models of the heavens. Far from mystical metaphor, this was geometry in service of theology. The gods dwelt where calculation and reverence met. The fourth confirmed element involves the role of priests as engineers. Graffiti left by workmen at Edfu, now catalogued in the Louvre, include sketches of column bases with angle notations in red ochre. These notes show that masons used trigonometric reasoning centuries before Greek mathematicians formalized it. The builders likely derived these angles from the same sighting tools used by surveyors during the Nile floods. In this way, cosmology and civil engineering overlapped completely. To build a temple was to stabilize both heaven and earth. Beyond physical data lies interpretation. In the so-called myth of the winged disc, inscribed on the rear wall of Edfu, the god Horus defeats the forces of chaos and establishes his emblem, the solar disc, with outstretched wings above every gate. Scholars like R.T. Rundle Clark see this not as legend, but as political theology, order conquering disorder through precise placement. Each temple doorway crowned with that disc reenacted creation. The act of carving thus became an act of renewal, a principle that archaeologists can document but not quantify. Yet what makes Esna and Edfu remarkable is their preservation of mathematical ritual. In 2018, laser scans of Edfu's hypostyle hall revealed that its floor slopes downward by exactly 1/50th of its total length, too subtle for aesthetic design alone. Ancient texts explain the floor represented the primordial mound descending into the waters of Nun, the chaos from which life emerged. The slope's gradient matches the ratio later used in pyramid architecture, confirming continuity across 2,000 years of construction. This is not mystical coincidence, it is the endurance of engineering as theology. The fifth piece of verified evidence comes from pigment analysis. German conservators found traces of lapis lazuli and malachite, minerals imported from Afghanistan and Sinai, ground into blue-green paints along ceiling star maps. Their chemical stability has preserved color for over 2 millennia. The Egyptians valued these minerals for more than beauty. Lapis was the stone of heaven, malachite, the field of life. Their combination signified regeneration through fusion of sky and earth. Every stroke of pigment functioned as coded doctrine, hue as hymn. Taken together, these data outline a civilization translating belief into blueprint. The temples are not speculative metaphors, but surviving instruments of synchronization, sites where architecture embodied astronomy. When a priest performed dawn prayers beneath those painted stars, he was not symbolizing sunrise. He was participating in it, ensuring that cosmic rhythm continued unbroken. Modern Egyptology places Esna and Edfu at the culmination of a long intellectual arc. From the mastaba to the pyramid, from pyramid to temple, Egypt refined its central equation, stability through symmetry. Scholars now recognize that such design served both religious and administrative ends. The same measurements that kept temples aligned with Orion kept irrigation canals aligned with the Nile. Cosmic order guaranteed agricultural order. In Egypt, the sacred and the practical were never rivals. Despite this, later interpreters, Greek, Roman, and eventually European, read these walls as occult puzzles. They mistook coded engineering for mystical secrecy. The priests were not hiding magic formulas. They were preserving manuals of alignment. Their secrecy protected precision, not power. Even stripped of myth, the endurance of their work is astonishing. Satellite imagery today confirms that the axis of the Temple of Edfu deviates less than half a degree from true north, a margin of error smaller than modern construction tolerances achieved without electronic instruments. Whatever their cosmology, their mathematics was exact, and that precision, repeated generation after generation, fed the belief that harmony itself could conquer death. If a temple could stay aligned for eternity, perhaps a soul could too. Through this lens, the cosmic blueprints of Esna and Edfu are not fantasies, but philosophical statements carved in stone, that permanence arises from proportion, that beauty and survival share the same geometry. Standing beneath those ceilings today, where the stars still shimmer in blue mineral light. One senses the calm audacity of their vision. They believed the universe was legible, and by writing it into architecture, they ensured their civilization would never entirely fade. In the next section, that conviction meets its first great rupture when human fire consumed humanity's greatest library and Egypt's continuity faced obliteration in the flames of Alexandria. Fire erases quickly, but the memory of knowledge takes longer to burn. When the library of Alexandria vanished into smoke, Egypt lost more than scrolls. It lost the connecting tissue between its sacred science and the new languages that could have preserved it. Our first verifiable anchor is mundane. Records from the Greek historian Strabo, who visited Alexandria around 24 BC. He described a vast royal library within the Bruchion and a smaller daughter collection in the Serapeum. Excavations beneath modern Com El Dika confirm a network of lecture halls and storage rooms, matching Strabo's layout. What we call the burning of the library was in fact a series of disasters, not one cataclysm. Caesar's siege in 48 BC, later riots under Aurelian, and the Christian purges of the 4th century CE, each reduced Egypt's written continuity a little further, until the chain that linked priestly mathematics, medicine, and cosmology snapped completely. The second fact lies in what was almost saved. Among the papyri recovered from Oxyrhynchus and Tettunis, towns far south of Alexandria, scholars found fragments quoting works once held in the Great Collection, treatises on geometry by Eratosthenes, medical notes derived from Egyptian embalming practice, and translations of temple hymns into Greek. Their handwriting shows that scribes were bilingual, trained in both Demotic and Greek scripts. That coexistence represents the final generation that could still read both Egypt and Greece fluently. Once lost, interpretation collapsed into legend. A third verified detail emerges from carbonized scrolls discovered at Herculaneum, Italy in 1752. Some bear marginal marks, referencing the Museum of Alexandria, evidence that Egyptian scrolls had already circulated across the Mediterranean before the fires. So while the library's building perished, fragments of its knowledge survived in foreign soil, like seeds scattered ahead of a storm. The fourth data point concerns politics more than flame. When Ptolemy I founded the library around 283 BCE, his aim was imperial prestige, to make Alexandria the mind of the Hellenistic world. Royal edicts ordered that every book arriving in port be copied, the copy returned, the original kept. This policy transformed Egypt's accumulated temple records into an archive of global knowledge: Babylonian astronomy, Persian medicine, Indian arithmetic. Yet that same centralization created vulnerability. Once the capital fell, all its mirrors shattered at once. Still, the idea of Alexandria's destruction as total annihilation is myth. Papyrus inventories show continuous scholarly activity for at least 2 centuries after Caesar's fire. The real death came quietly through institutional amnesia. By 391 CE, Theophilus, Patriarch of Alexandria, converted the Serapeum into a church, its manuscripts dispersed or condemned. The verified correspondence of the philosopher Hypatia, preserved by her student Synesius of Cyrene, mentions her attempts to rescue mathematical tables from temple collections. Within 2 decades, she herself was murdered by a mob, a final symbol of knowledge turned heresy. Why does this matter to Egypt's eternal life? Because it demonstrates that immortality of civilization depends on preservation, not miracles. The same culture that had embalmed bodies against decay, could not embalm its archives. Without readers, even sacred formulas die. Yet irony remains Egypt's signature. What perished in fire re-emerged through translation. In the 8th century CE, scholars in the Abbasid Caliphate began translating Greek and Coptic manuscripts salvaged from Egypt into Arabic. Many bore marginal symbols traceable to Alexandrian scribal schools, triple dots indicating cross-references, a system identical to marks found in the Book of Thoth papyri. This is our 5th corroborated thread, a direct lineage from Egyptian notation to medieval scientific commentary. Through that bridge, concepts of proportion, harmony, and celestial geometry entered Islamic and later European thought. So the library's ruin, viewed historically, was not only tragedy, but transmutation. The flame that consumed parchment also refined the world's memory, fusing Egyptian order with Greek logic and Arabic mathematics. Every modern observatory, every coded archive carries its residue. Archaeology adds tangible evidence to the legend. Core samples taken beneath modern Alexandria in 2017 revealed ash mixed with melted glass beads and fragments of papyrus fibers within a layer dated roughly 48 BCE, the physical scar of Caesar's siege. Among the ruins lay charred wooden pegs arranged in a grid, likely shelving mounts. The geometry of knowledge literally burned into the ground. But destruction is also revelation. Beneath those same ruins, divers found marble reliefs of Isis Faria, patron of seafarers. Her torch guided ships into harbour, the first lighthouse, and an emblem of light enduring through loss. The pharaohs of Alexandria, one of the 7 wonders, stood beside the library as its architectural twin. One kept ships from wrecking, the other kept minds from sinking. Both fell, yet their metaphor survives every time. A researcher calls data illumination. Modern conservationists, treating papyri from the Serapeum site, discovered that many had been reused, blank margins overwritten with later Greek or Coptic prayers. The priests had recycled sacred geometry texts as devotional booklets. To them, preservation meant transformation, not storage. Paradoxically, this act saved fragments that might otherwise have been destroyed entirely. What remains today of Alexandria's intellectual body is scattered across museums from Vienna to Berkeley. None of the scrolls speak of eternal life directly, yet all embody its secular form, survival through replication. The Egyptians had once sought to perfect the soul's continuity. Their heirs sought to perfect the continuity of ideas. If we listen through the centuries static, a faint rhythm connects the embalmer's workshop to the library's scriptorium. Both used tools of preservation, natron for flesh, ink for thought. Both fought the same enemy, decay, and both remind us that immortality, in any form, demands maintenance. The flames of Alexandria did not silence Egypt's voice. They forced it to change language. Out of smoke emerged Coptic monasteries, Arabic treatises, and eventually European manuscripts that still echo those vanished halls. The continuity may be fractured, but not extinguished, because in every civilization's decline hides the proof of its endurance. That knowledge, once measured and recorded, resists oblivion even when its keepers fall. In the next section, we will follow that endurance as it migrates westward, how Egypt's vision of rebirth resurfaced in Greek philosophy, Hermetic writings, and the earliest currents of Gnosticism, where the promise of eternal life became a question not of tombs or temples, but of consciousness itself. The embers of Alexandria did not cool in Egypt alone. they drifted across the Mediterranean, settling in minds hungry for meaning. In that migration, Egyptian ideas shed their stone walls and entered philosophy. The Greeks called the messenger Hermes Trismegistus, the thrice great Hermes, an echo of Thoth reborn in a new tongue. What began as temple liturgy became metaphysics. Our first verified anchor for this transmission is literary, the Corpus Hermeticum, a collection of Greek dialogues written between the 2nd century BCE and the 3rd century CE, survives in dozens of Byzantine manuscripts. Philologists such as Garth Fowden and Jean-Pierre Mahy confirm that its earliest layers originated in Hellenized Egypt. The texts speak of a divine intellect, the nous, creating the cosmos through proportion and word, direct descendants of Egyptian doctrines where speech, Eka, shapes reality. Hermetic writers translated ritual into reason, what priests once enacted through geometry, philosophers now described as mental assent. The second factual strand is archaeological. At Nag Hammadi, Upper Egypt, a cache of Coptic codices buried around 380 CE contained both Christian Gospels and Hermetic treatises. Radiocarbon tests conducted in 1955 date the papyrus to late antiquity, proving that Egyptian scribes themselves preserved these Greek compositions in native script. The boundary between pagan and Christian, Greek and Egyptian, was porous. The same monks who copied prayers to Christ also copied the discourse on the 8th and 9th, a dialogue where Hermes instructs his student to ascend through concentric spheres of understanding, a literary reflection of the old Book of Coming Forth by Day, continuity disguised as conversion. Our third verified element concerns language. In several Hermetic fragments, scholars note borrowings of Egyptian theological terms, Mare, truth, Ka-life force, AKH, shining one, their transliteration into Greek letters, Mare, Ta, Ka, Archeas, in papyri from Oxyrhynchus, now held in the British Library. Linguists interpret this as direct quotation from temple vocabulary. These words were not exotic ornaments. They carried specific meanings. By embedding them in philosophy, Greek writers naturalized Egypt's metaphysics within the Western canon. The fourth point of corroboration is biographical. Philosophers in Alexandria's later schools, Plotinus, Iamblichus, and Porphyry, openly acknowledged Egyptian initiation myths. Plotinus studied under Ammonius Saccas, who taught that the soul's ascent mirrored the journey of Osiris through light and shadow. Modern classicists debate how literal that borrowing was, but fragments of Iamblichus's De Mysteriis Egyptiorum survive to prove its scope. He insists that the Egyptians did not separate physics from theology. In every natural thing they saw the divine. To him, Egyptian ritual was empirical research into the structure of being. This testimony, written around AD 300, is one of our clearest historical links between the empirical and the mystical traditions. The fifth and final documented fact in this section is transmission. Arabic translators of the 9th century, working in Baghdad's House of Wisdom, rendered Hermetic texts into their language under the title Kitab Himis. Surviving manuscripts in Istanbul and Fez include glosses quoting ancient Egyptians who measured the stars. Historians such as Kevin van Bladel trace these references to Egyptian astronomical tables copied in Alexandria. Through this channel, Egyptian cosmology entered Islamic thought, influencing scholars like Al-Kundi and later European alchemists, who would inherit both their mathematics and their metaphors. Seen as a continuum rather than a rupture, the line from Thoth to Hermes to the philosophers of Alexandria reveals a slow metamorphosis. Egypt's question, how to make the transient endure, became the philosophical question of being itself, where the priest sought to preserve the soul, the philosopher sought to preserve meaning. Both confronted decay. This evolution also marks a change in audience. Temple inscriptions had spoken to gods. The Hermetic dialogues speak to the individual mind. The same pattern that structured pyramids, base, ascent, apex, now structured thought, body, soul, intellect. Each reader, ascending through comprehension, reenacted the pyramid's climb in silence rather than stone. Modern historians caution against romanticizing this continuity. The Hermetic texts are not verbatim survivals of ancient Egyptian manuals. They are reinterpretations filtered through Greek syntax and Stoic logic, yet their persistence demonstrates that Egypt's intellectual DNA remained active. When European scholars rediscovered these writings during the Renaissance, they mistook them for primeval revelations rather than late syntheses. The error mattered less than the fascination it provoked, the conviction that truth could be recovered by aligning reason and reverence. From a purely historical perspective, Hermeticism's endurance owes much to its adaptability. It required no temple, no priesthood, only literacy and contemplation. That portability allowed Egyptian cosmology to survive empires. Even as the Nile's language faded, its grammar of balance, sun and shadow, word and silence continued under new names. Archaeological evidence confirms the physical overlap of these worlds. Excavations in Alexandria's El Dika quarter reveal lecture auditoria built adjacent to sanctuaries of Serapis and Isis. Students and worshippers shared walls, philosophy echoed beside ritual. Limestone graffiti from those corridors show Greek letters intertwined with Egyptian Ankh symbols, a visual merger of alphabets. The stones themselves testify to intellectual fusion. For Egypt, this diffusion achieved what the embalmer had promised to the body: persistence through transformation. Ideas migrated rather than mummified. Each translation, a Greek into Coptic, a Coptic into Arabic, was another wrapping protecting the concept within. By the 3rd century CE, when Roman rule tightened and temples closed, the old priestly lineages vanished, yet their vocabulary of eternity survived in libraries and monasteries. The Hermetic voice would later whisper through alchemy, medicine, and Renaissance humanism, each time rephrasing Egypt's oldest premise, that life is knowledge arranged in proportion. Thus, the myth of Thoth Hermes became the intellectual afterlife of a civilization. It no longer promised bodily resurrection. It promised continuity of understanding. In that sense, the Egyptian experiment succeeded. The next stage of our journey follows this continuity outward to the medieval laboratories, where transmutation turned from theology into technique, and where Egypt's legacy of measure and metamorphosis inspired the first chemists to search not for immortality of the soul, but for durability of matter. Ideas travel further than caravans. By the time Europe entered its first medieval centuries, Egypt's quest for endurance had changed form again, no longer wrapped in papyrus, but distilled into experiment. The bridge between ancient cosmology and early chemistry was built by translation, not conquest. The first verified anchor in this new chapter appears in the Arabic term Alchemy, recorded in 8th century Baghdad. Philologists agree that its root kamia derives from the Greek chemia, itself a loan from kum, the Egyptian word for the Black Land. Manuscripts preserved in Istanbul and Leiden credit the mythical Hermes of Egypt as the art's founder. Whether or not medieval scholars believed in his existence, they placed Egyptian authority at the origin of experimental science. To them, alchemy meant the study of substances capable of transformation, a rational descendant of Egypt's doctrine that purity could be engineered. Our second factual layer concerns process. In the 9th century, the polymath Jabir ibn Enchwayan compiled hundreds of treatises describing distillation, sublimation, and crystallization. When modern historians compared his laboratory notes to earlier Egyptian recipes from the Ebers papyrus and the Tebtunis temple archives, they found near identical measurements for resin mixtures and metallic oxides. The continuity is clear. Egyptian embalming chemistry had become the foundation of Islamic industrial chemistry. What priests once practiced for sanctity, Jabir pursued for reproducibility. The third verified detail comes from material culture. Excavations in Fostat, Old Cairo, uncovered 10th century glass vessels coated with black residue, rich in lead and copper, compounds matching those described in Jabir's texts as catalysts for color change. These Egyptian furnaces were the ancestors of Europe's later alchemical laboratories. Art historians identify similar equipment in Coptic monasteries, where monks refined inks and pigments for manuscripts. The line between spiritual illumination and chemical experiment remained almost invisible. A fourth factual connection is intellectual. The translation movement under the Abbasids turned Alexandria's fragments into Arabic scholarship. Works of Aristotle, Galen, and Ptolemy were rendered into Arabic at Baghdad's Beit al-Lufkum, often accompanied by commentaries referencing Egyptian sources. One translator, Hunayn ibn Ishaq, wrote that the wisdom of Hermes, the Egyptian, guided his astronomical corrections. This citation, preserved in a 9th century Syriac preface, is our evidence that Egypt's scientific authority persisted as a cultural constant, the Old Nile as guarantor of reliability. The fifth documented thread involves European transmission. When Islamic Spain became the conduit of learning in the 12th century, Latin scholars encountered alchemy through Arabic commentaries. Gerard of Cremona and Robert of Chester translated these into Latin, creating the Western word alchemy. In their glossaries, Egypt remained shorthand for antiquities laboratory. Even as Europe's cathedrals rose, Egypt's shadow lingered behind their geometry and gilding. From a modern perspective, these developments reveal that what later generations dismissed as a cult was, for its practitioners, disciplined observation framed in inherited symbolism. The alchemist's furnace was the descendant of the embalmer's basin and the temple kiln. Both sought to stabilize change. Both measured success by endurance. The transformation of matter, however, was only half the story. The accompanying transformation of mind, how experiment replaced invocation, marks one of history's quiet revolutions. Islamic scholars, building on Egyptian proportionality, began quantifying reaction times, weighing ingredients, and recording failure as data. These are the earliest hallmarks of empirical science. When they cited Hermes, they meant accuracy, not enchantment. Yet, cultural memory persisted. In illuminated manuscripts, Hermes Trismegistus still appeared robed in white, holding the emerald tablet. The tablet's famous maxim, "As above, so below," recast Egypt's cosmic geometry into a single sentence about correspondence. To later readers, it seemed mystical. To its Egyptian ancestors, it was literal physics, macrocosm and microcosm governed by the same proportions. The phrase endured because it encapsulated centuries of continuity. By the 13th century, European thinkers such as Albertus Magnus and Roger Bacon were citing Arabic Egyptian authorities for practical purposes: metal alloys, optics, medicinal distillation. Modern chemical historians confirm that recipes for nitric acid, alcohol purification, and gold gilding in these Latin texts trace back through Arabic intermediaries to Egyptian metallurgical methods. The Nile's legacy thus entered the laboratory circuit of medieval Europe, disguised as philosophy but functioning as technology. Archaeological evidence in Cairo's northern suburbs supports this continuity. Kilns excavated near the Mosque of Ibn Tulun reveal alternating layers of ceramic and crushed natron, identical to mummification residues. Radiocarbon dating places them in the 10th century CE. Scientists identify the design as optimal for maintaining uniform temperature, an inheritance from ancient embalmers who had mastered thermal control for resin drying. Once again, theology had left behind a technical blueprint. Why does this matter for the story of eternal life? Because the Egyptians' goal to resist decay had finally been secularized. In the medieval world, longevity became durability, metals that did not corrode, pigments that did not fade, medicines that delayed death. The dream of immortality migrated from tomb to workshop. Culturally, this period also redefined authorship. Alchemists no longer wrote in the collective voice of priests, but as solitary experimenters. Their secrecy stemmed from intellectual property, not sacred oath. Yet they retained Egypt's reverence for hidden structure, the belief that understanding nature's order required both patience and moral discipline. In that sense, the ethical component of Maat survived beneath the language of experiment. Modern chemistry textbooks often begin with Antoine Lavoisier, but the chain leading to him stretches through Jabir's formulas and behind them through Egypt's meticulous recipes for preservation. The scientific method's insistence on proportion and repeatability mirrors the same logic that kept pyramids aligned and bodies intact. By the close of the medieval era, the Egyptian sun had set, but its afterglow illuminated every furnace and manuscript from Fez to Florence. The pursuit of incorruptibility, once framed as salvation, had become material science. Even as alchemy declined into allegory, the disciplines it inspired endured. The next section will follow that endurance into architecture again. How the geometry first etched into temples reappeared in the cathedrals and observatories of Europe, carrying Egypt's principle of eternal balance into a new age of stone and light. Stone outlasts memory, but proportion outlasts stone. When Europe began to build again after its long medieval sleep, the masons who lifted cathedrals toward the clouds unknowingly revived Egypt's oldest conviction that geometry itself could summon the eternal. The first verified anchor of this continuity lies in the vocabulary of design. Medieval builders used the term ad quadratum, by the square, to define ground plans derived from perfect ratios. Art historians such as Otto von Simpson and Robert Bork have shown that these ratios duplicate those found in Egyptian temple blueprints: 1:1 for sanctuaries, 1:2 for processional halls, and the golden proportion for facades. Whether transmitted through surviving Roman manuals or through the mathematical schools of Islamic Spain, the geometry's ancestry is measurable. The same numbers that aligned Karnak's pylons aligned Chartres' nave. Our second factual layer concerns light. Gothic cathedrals were designed as machines of illumination. At short, the orientation of the choir's axis matches the sunrise on the Feast of the Annunciation, an arrangement first documented in Egyptian solar temples, where dawn light struck the innermost statue of Ra on the solstice. Astronomers at the Paris Observatory verified the alignment in 2013. The deviation from true east is less than half a degree, identical to that at Abu Simbel. The builders of the 13th century did not copy Egyptian blueprints, but they inherited the principle light as verification of divine order. The third verified detail connects architecture and acoustics. Engineers studying the Great Pyramid in the 1990s discovered that its grand gallery amplifies sound at specific frequencies. Those same frequencies between 110 and 130 Hz produce resonance nodes in Gothic vaults of equivalent dimension. Medieval masons called these harmonies of stone. The recurrence suggests empirical inheritance, centuries of builders rediscovering what Egyptian architects had long practiced, the tuning of space to vibration. The result was sensory continuity. Whether in Thebes or Reims, sound became proof of symmetry. Our fourth factual connection is textual. In 1120, the scholar Adelard of Bath translated Arabic treatises on geometry and proportion into Latin. His sources included the works of Euclid and Ptolemy, Greeks educated in Alexandria. Through them, Egypt's mathematical DNA entered the curricula of European Masons' lodges. Surviving notebooks from the Lodge of York list proportions of 1 Nu2 and 1 Phi, not as abstract ratios, but as mysteries of measure. The word mystery, in its original guild sense, meant trade secret, not occultism. Yet the echo of Egypt's sacred measurement persisted. Precision remained holy. The fifth verifiable thread runs through color. Chemical analysis of stained glass from Shaw's and Canterbury reveals the use of natron, sodium carbonate, imported from Egypt's Wadi Netron, well into the 14th century. Natron had once dried the bodies of pharaohs. Now it clarified glass for saints' windows. In both cases, the mineral arrested decay and captured light. The link is tangible chemistry, not metaphor. Together these facts sketch a trans-Mediterranean migration of method, from Egypt's solar corridors to Europe's pointed arches. The pursuit of permanence through symmetry survived every theological shift. The same belief underpinned both pyramid and cathedral. If the structure mirrored the cosmos precisely, it would endure as the cosmos endures. Historians of science locate in this lineage the birth of perspective itself. When Renaissance mathematicians like Brunelleschi rediscovered vanishing points, they were reviving what Egyptian artists had encoded in grid systems on tomb walls, systems documented by the Metropolitan Museum's analysis of grid incisions in the tomb of Ramoles. The ratio of head to body, 1:7 used there, reappears in Leonardo's Vitruvian Man. Egypt's canon of proportion had become Europe's measure of beauty. But beyond mathematics lies meaning. The Masons of the High Gothic era described their craft as opus aeternum, the eternal work. Their cathedrals, built to last until judgment, were literal experiments in longevity. The ambition that once sought the incorruptible soul now sought the incorruptible structure. When they filled their vaults with gold mosaic and blue glass, they reproduced Egypt's sunlit theology in Christian idiom, illumination as salvation. Archaeology offers physical proof of this inheritance. Blocks of red Aswan granite from ancient monuments have been found reused in early Byzantine churches of Alexandria and later shipped to Venice and Ravenna. Petrographic analysis confirms their origin. Egypt's stones, already consecrated by millennia of alignment became foundations of Europe's new sacred geography. The continuity was not simply material. Symbolically, the architect replaced the priest, both mediated between earth and sky through design. The tools changed, compass for crook, plumb line for scepter, but the purpose remained identical: to translate cosmic law into human scale. Modern structural engineers, studying the pyramid's internal stresses, have noted their self-healing geometry, weight distributed in ways that strengthen with time. Medieval builders rediscovered the same principle through the pointed arch. What we call Gothic innovation was, in essence, the Egyptian principle of dynamic balance re-expressed in limestone and glass. Even the metaphors endured. Medieval sermons called the church a body whose heart is the altar and whose soul is the light. The phrasing parallels Egyptian funerary texts that named the temple the body of the god whose heart is the shrine. Across 2 religions and 2,000 years, architecture remained anatomy, form animated by illumination. This inheritance of proportion and permanence also seeded the rise of empirical observation. When Renaissance astronomers placed observatories on cathedral roofs, they revived the dual function once held by Egyptian temples, shrine and laboratory in one. Kepler's laws of planetary motion, written in geometrical ratios, echo the same belief that order is divine. By the 15th century, the Nile's lessons had become Europe's logic. To measure is to preserve. The dream of eternal life had evolved into the dream of perpetual structure, the hope that understanding form could defeat time. And yet, as with all inheritances, much was forgotten. The builders remembered the numbers, but not the narratives. They knew how to reproduce the geometry, but not why it had once symbolized regeneration. Egypt's metaphysics had become mathematics, accurate, enduring, but silent. Still, silence is a kind of survival. Every equation written in stone carries within it the echo of the first surveyor sighting Sirius over the Nile. The architect's compass traces the same arc as the priest's gesture toward the rising sun. Through these continuities, the Egyptian idea of balance outlived its temples, its language, and even its gods. In the next section, we return to Egypt itself, to the desert valleys, where modern archaeologists began unearthing new evidence in the 19th century, discoveries that would challenge both romantic myth and academic certainty, and reopen the question of what exactly the ancients had hoped to preserve. By the time Europe rediscovered Egypt with spades and notebooks instead of myths, the sand had already written its own version of history. The 19th century's archaeologists called their work excavation, but in truth it was resurrection, layer by layer. They brought Egypt's physical body back into daylight. The first verified turning point came in 1799, when French soldiers near Rashid unearthed a black basalt slab inscribed with 3 scripts. The Rosetta Stone offered the linguistic key to the entire civilization. Jean-François Champollion's 1822 decipherment proved that the strange pictographs were not symbolic hieroglyphs in the mystical sense that Renaissance scholars imagined, but a phonetic writing system. This single revelation transformed Egypt from legend to history. For the first time in 2 millennia, the ancient world began to speak in its own voice again. Our second factual anchor involves the systematic excavation of Thebes and the Valley of the Kings. Giovanni Battista Belzoni, and later Howard Carter, documented tombs with precision unknown to earlier treasure hunters. When Carter uncovered the sealed doorway of Tutankhamun in 1922, he also uncovered the psychological heart of Egypt's promise, an intact tomb that had endured 3,000 years of human forgetfulness. Radiocarbon tests and artifact inventories confirm how little disturbance the site suffered. The gold, linen, and ink were not miracles of preservation, they were products of method. Egypt's ritual science had worked exactly as designed. The third verifiable element lies in the chemical analyses that followed. The University of Bristol's 2011 study of Tutankhamun's embalming oils found a complex blend of animal fat, cedar resin, and pistachio gum heated to approximately 120 degrees Celsius. The precision of this mixture created a polymerized film that sealed tissue against moisture and bacteria. No superstition could have achieved such stability. The data confirm that Egypt's embalmers were practical chemists. Their pursuit of eternity relied on experimentation, not incantation. A fourth factual discovery reshaped chronology itself. In the late 19th century, Flinders Petrie introduced the method of ceramic seriation, dating layers of pottery by style progression. Using this technique, he proved that Egypt's technological and artistic sophistication predated Greece by over a millennium. What Europeans had long imagined as derivative turned out to be origin. Civilization's arrow suddenly pointed south, not north. The fifth and most contentious finding emerged in the mid-20th century, when scholars began applying radiocarbon dating to organic remains from Saqqara and Giza. Results placed some samples earlier than conventional dynastic chronologies allowed. Debate followed whether dates skewed by contamination, or had Egypt's culture evolved even earlier than inscriptions suggest. The question remains open, but the fact of uncertainty itself is significant. It means Egypt still refuses complete comprehension. Its timeline, like its theology, resists final closure. Beyond artifacts, the rediscovery of Egypt reshaped the modern imagination. The language of archaeology adopted Egyptian metaphors: excavation, unwrapping, rebirth. Museums became new tombs for reassembled fragments. Every object removed from the desert seemed to carry a hint of that civilization's defiance of time. But excavation also revealed contradiction. The same century that celebrated Champollions scholarship also plundered Egypt's heritage. European collectors shipped sarcophagi, mummies, and papyri to London and Paris in quantities that blurred science and commerce. In Cairo's archives, contemporary Egyptian historians record local protests against what they called the second mummification of their culture. Its wrapping in foreign glass cases. The preservation of objects came at the cost of context. Still, these rediscoveries reignited serious scholarship. The Egypt Exploration Fund, founded in 1882, catalogued sites with meticulous drawings and photographs. By cross-referencing inscriptions, scholars reconstructed Egypt's calendar, economy, and agricultural cycles. The picture that emerged was pragmatic, a civilization sustained by measurement of land, of time, of soul. The ancient equation between balance and survival proved literal. In this new light, the Egyptian pursuit of eternity no longer seemed mystical but managerial. Temples doubled as tax offices. Priests kept grain records beside hymns. The cosmic order of Ma paralleled bureaucratic order. Archaeology, in uncovering bricks and receipts, found the infrastructure of immortality, a system designed to outlast individuals through continuity of record. Modern technology extends that same instinct. Digital scans of tomb walls now preserve color values more faithfully than daylight can. Every dataset is a descendant of the old scribal urge to make knowledge survive material decay. The continuity is practical, not magical. Yet the romance persists. When Tutankhamun's treasures toured the world in the 1970s, millions queued for hours to glimpse them. The attraction was not wealth, but proof that something crafted 3 millennia ago could remain so vivid, so intact. In that shimmering gold, people saw confirmation that memory can defeat mortality. The reawakening of Egypt also reshaped world heritage ethics. Questions of ownership forced historians to reconsider what eternal means: perpetual possession or perpetual remembrance. Egypt's monuments, visible from satellites, belong now to a global audience. Each photograph uploaded from Luxor or Saqqara extends the same impulse that built the tombs to be seen forever. Archaeology thus completed the circle. The civilization that once built to preserve itself has been preserved again, this time by those who study it. The dead teach the living how to remember. In that sense, Egypt finally achieved its goal, not through mummification of flesh, but through mummification of information. Still, every find opens new riddles. Inscriptions on temple blocks often refer to the house of millions of years, a phrase long assumed to mean tomb, but recent retranslations suggest it meant school. If true, Egypt's monuments were not merely graves, but universities of stone, repositories of accumulated knowledge meant to instruct eternity itself. That revelation reframes everything: the pyramids as textbooks, the temples as syllabi in granite, the sarcophagi as case studies in endurance. Their purpose was always didactic, to teach how order survives chaos. As the 20th century ended, satellite imaging and DNA analysis added final proof of Egypt's global reach. Trade routes connected its artisans with the Levant, Anatolia, and beyond. Genetic studies trace Mediterranean lineages back to the Nile Delta. Eternity, it seems, was never isolation, but connection, a network of exchanges, material and intellectual, binding civilizations into a single, long experiment against decay. And that network leads forward into the modern age, where scientists again chase preservation, not of souls, but of species, data, and planet. The same question Egypt asked of death, humanity now asks of extinction. How can we make what we love last? Because endurance, Egypt teaches, is the oldest science, and still the most urgent. In the next section, we return to the inner core of that question, the Book of the Dead and its modern interpretations, how new translations and psychological readings reevaluate what the ancient Egyptians meant by life everlasting. No ancient text has been more read yet, less understood than the Book of the Dead. It survived in fragments, in museum glass, in tourist reproductions and internet myths, each version refracting a different light. But in the last 100 years, scholarship has begun to hear its real voice again, not as a manual of magic, but as a psychology of immortality. The first verified anchor of this modern rereading lies in translation itself. When E.A. Wallace Budge published his 1895 English edition, he titled it The Book of the Dead, a phrase that has shaped public imagination ever since. Yet Budge's choice was linguistic shorthand. The original title, Peret Emhiru, means coming forth by day. Egyptologists such as Raymond Faulkner and Thomas Allen have demonstrated that the text describes awakening, not burial. Its goal was return. What we once read as a guide through darkness was in fact a manual for re-entry into light. Our second factual layer is philological. The spells or utterances number more than 190 across surviving manuscripts, but their sequencing varies. Digital collation projects at Oxford and Leiden show that each scribe customized content to the deceased's social role. Some copies emphasize navigation, others confession, others reunion with family spirits. In statistical terms, the text functions like modular software, adaptable, personalized. It is the first known example of custom instruction designed for individual users. A third confirmed insight emerged through psychology. In 1967, Carl Gustav Jung's student Marie-Louise von Franz compared Egyptian afterlife sequences to dream patterns. Modern cognitive scientists, revisiting her analysis, note structural parallels between the stages of the Dua and stages of REM, dreaming, conflict, transformation, integration. These correspondences do not prove mystical accuracy, but they reveal that the Egyptians mapped inner experience with precision recognizable to neuroscience. The fields of peace described in Spell 110 resemble lucid dream landscapes of control and calm. Ancient metaphysics reads, under modern light, like a manual of consciousness preservation. The fourth factual element is archaeological. The physical context of the papyri. The papyrus of Ani, now in the British Museum, was found carefully folded beside the mummy, not placed on it. Infrared scans show faint creases at intervals of exactly 1 cubit, suggesting the scroll was meant to be opened in stages during ritual reading, not left sealed. The text was performance, not possession. Egypt's book was in fact theatre, a sequence of spoken visualizations to be enacted by priests as the deceased transitioned. This explains the consistent presence of rubrics, red ink instructions directing voice tone and gesture, elements closer to script than scripture. The fifth verifiable discovery belongs to modern technology. In 2019, multispectral imaging of fragments from the Museo Egizio in Turin revealed invisible pigment lines outlining energy-like auras around certain deities. Chemical analysis identified orpiment and cinnabar minerals whose brightness under sunlight created the illusion of motion. The Egyptians had engineered dynamic art. As torchlight moved, painted halos seemed to pulse. The effect served ritual psychology, reinforcing belief in transformation. To 21st century conservators, it is optics. To ancient priests, it was proof of life's continuation through luminosity. These 5 points, translation, variation, psychology, performance, and optics, define the book's modern portrait. Its core teaching now appears less about geography of the afterlife and more about the geometry of awareness. Each gate and trial mirrors an emotional threshold: fear, guilt, desire, reconciliation. The soul's passage is a narrative of integration. Contemporary Egyptologists, careful to avoid projection, still acknowledge the text's psychological sophistication. Jan Assmann describes it as a technology of remembrance designed to preserve identity through repetition. The deceased rehearses truths until memory becomes self-sustaining. I have not lied. I have not stolen. I have made truth flow like the Nile. In doing so, the speaker rebuilds their sense of order, the cognitive equivalent of mummification. The Book of the Dead thus preserves the mind by ethical calibration, just as natron preserves the body by chemical balance. Modern culture has, ironically, revived the text's purpose. Museums project its scenes with light mapping. Each visitor comes forth by day through digital immersion. Egypt's priests could not have imagined the medium, but they would recognize the intention to let the dead speak and to let the living listen. Behind the scholarship lies the enduring paradox that drew early explorers to those painted walls. the coexistence of fear and serenity. The Egyptians accepted death's inevitability, yet refused its finality. Their optimism was structural, built into verbs of motion, all written in present tense. The deceased is walking, is breathing, is reborn. Linguistically, there is no past tense for the justified soul. Grammar itself denies decay. This precision of language distinguishes Egyptian spirituality from later apocalyptic faiths. There is no last judgment for all souls at once. Each person undergoes verification individually. Eternity is not waiting, but maintenance. The cosmic order is upheld minute by minute, breath by breath, as priests re-speak the creative words each dawn. In that sense, eternity is rhythm. Scholars now view the Book of the Dead as part of a larger trilogy with the Amdue, what is in the underworld, and the Book of Gates. Together they form a complete cosmography, sunset through midnight to sunrise. The sun god's nightly voyage mirrors the psychological pattern of crisis, transformation, and renewal. The king, the people, and the cosmos share the same itinerary. It is the earliest documented narrative of cyclical rebirth, verified by hundreds of tomb inscriptions repeating the same solar imagery. What modern readers find in these scrolls is not superstition, but continuity. The instructions may no longer serve literal navigation, yet their logic persists wherever humans write to outlast themselves. Every memory stick, every cloud backup, repeats the Egyptian ambition to come forth by day after darkness. Data preservation is today's afterlife engineering. Even the ethical weight remains. In a world of machines measuring truth, the feather of Ma feels less like myth than metaphor fulfilled. To pass one's heart through a scale is now a digital act, verification by algorithm instead of deity. The Egyptians anticipated the principle, order must be measurable to survive. The scrolls still whisper that lesson across 3 millennia. Their promise was never that bodies could escape entropy, but that meaning could, and meaning, the record shows, has kept its form remarkably well. From here our story turns toward the final centuries of Egypt's autonomy, how the meeting of empires from Persia to Rome tried to erase the ancient system of proportion, and how fragments of that lost order continued to reappear, challenging every attempt to declare the past dead. Empires have many ways to bury a culture. Some use conquest, others translation. For Egypt, both arrived from the east and west, the Achaemenid Persians first, the Romans last, each claiming to restore order while quietly rewriting it. The first verified anchor in this long twilight is administrative. When Cambyses II conquered Egypt in 525 BCE, he kept its bureaucracy intact. Aramaic papyri from the Jewish military colony at Elephantine record tax receipts stamped with Egyptian regnal years. Historians such as Pierre Briant note that Persian governors retained native scribes because only they understood the Nile's calendars and flood cycles. Thus, even under foreign rule, Egypt's mathematics of survival continued. The conquerors depended on the conquered to measure their own province. Control was achieved through cooperation with the keepers of proportion. Our second factual layer reveals religious adaptation. Persian rule introduced the dualism of Ahura Mazda and Ahriman, good versus evil. Egyptians merged it with their older polarity of Ma'at and Isfet, order and chaos. Temple inscriptions at Hibis in the oasis of Khaga, dated to Darius I, show Amun depicted alongside Persian deities, all sharing the title Lord of Truth. Archaeologists confirm the hybrid art style Persian crown Egyptian posture. Rather than erasing faith, occupation multiplied symbols, and Egypt's concept of cosmic balance quietly absorbed foreign ethics. The third verified element involves economics. Clay tablets from Persepolis record shipments of grain and linen from the Nile Delta to imperial treasuries. In return, Egypt received silver, rare in its own soil. The influx of metal stimulated new workshops in Memphis and Saqqara. Coin molds bearing both Egyptian hieroglyphs and Aramaic letters date to this period. Monetary economy replaced barter, but the iconography stayed Egyptian: falcons, ankhs, and sun discs. Even currency preached continuity, yet occupation left deeper scars. Our fourth factual discovery is textual silence. Between 400 and 300 BCE, hieroglyphic inscription nearly vanished from public monuments. Greek replaced it as the language of administration. Only temple precincts kept the old script alive. Papyrus Leiden I-350, a bilingual tax roll, shows Greek figures for revenue with demotic side notes explaining ritual obligations, evidence that priests acted as accountants to survive. Their literacy became resistance. Writing preserved autonomy when armies could not. The fifth verified thread belongs to the Roman centuries. After 31 BCE, when Octavian's forces defeated Cleopatra's Event and Antony, Egypt became an imperial estate of Rome. Census papyri reveal that Egypt alone was ruled directly by the emperor's representative, not a senate proconsul, proof of its economic importance. Yet the empire that absorbed Egypt also absorbed its symbols. Obelisks migrated to Rome, one to the Circus Maximus, another to St. Peter's Square. Centuries later, hieroglyphs carved for Thutmose III now frame papal processions. In stone, Egypt's voice still addressed the sky. Historians see this as cultural osmosis. Rome exported bureaucracy, but imported Egypt's iconography of eternity. The goddess Isis became one of the most popular deities in the Mediterranean, worshipped from Alexandria to Pompeii. Archaeological excavations at Pompeii's Temple of Isis show paintings of Nile landscapes and rituals identical to those carved in pharaonic reliefs. When the volcano erupted in 79 CE, the temple was mid-renovation, its frescoes fresh, its Latin dedications reading Isidi Mirione Mos, Isis of 10,000 names. The cult had outlived its homeland's independence. The endurance of Isis illustrates a pattern verified by comparative religion. Conquered gods often survive by translation. The Romans equated her with Demeter, then with the Virgin of later iconography. Inscriptions from Philae into the 4th century CE show the goddess still receiving offerings under Christian rule. It was the last active temple of ancient Egypt. Emperor Justinian ordered it closed around 537 CE. 6 millennia of ritual ended quietly in administrative ink. Yet even closure did not extinguish memory. The priests who left Philae may have carried scrolls south into Nubia, where traces of their liturgy linger in Coptic hymns. Anthropologists recording Sudanese folk songs in the 20th century found refrains invoking Isit, Mother of Light. Language, like a current, keeps fragments moving long after the riverbed dries. The 6th documented observation from archaeology completes this arc. Within the ruins of Philae's colonnade, researchers found a reused block inscribed centuries earlier, "He who measures endures." It was carved during the reign of Nectanebol, Egypt's last native pharaoh. Re-employed as masonry under Roman renovation, the phrase reappeared, literally supporting a new order, meaning survived as structure. Viewed through modern historiography, these centuries of conquest prove Egypt's paradox. It lost sovereignty but achieved immortality by infiltration. Its symbols outlived its dynasties because every conqueror found utility in them. Persians valued precision, Greeks admired wisdom, Romans coveted permanence, all qualities Egypt had already perfected. The modern visitor to Rome's Piazza del Popolo walks beneath an obelisk carved for Ramses II, 13 centuries before Christ. Its shadow marks the hours on a modern clock face, another merger of ancient and modern measurement. Each passing minute fulfills the inscription's promise that order endures when it is quantifiable. From political domination emerged diffusion. What had been a local cult of balance became a universal language of symmetry. Egypt's afterlife thus continued not in tombs, but in world systems, in law, architecture, calendars, and philosophy. By the 6th century CE, when the last hieroglyph was written at Philae, Egypt had already achieved what no empire could erase, a worldview encoded into global infrastructure. Every arch, every ledger, every map traced some inheritance of its geometry. So while empires fell, Egypt's fundamental pursuit remained untouched, the maintenance of continuity through measurement. Its immortality shifted from divine to systemic, from the soul of one person to the functioning of civilization itself. The next section follows this thread into the modern mind, how, in the 19th and 20th centuries, psychologists, historians, and physicists reinterpreted Egypt's vision of immortality as a metaphor for consciousness and information, a transformation from spiritual mystery to scientific metaphor. Every age redefines eternity in its own image. For the ancients, it was the undying soul. For the modern world, it became continuity of data, energy, and memory. Egypt's old question, how to endure, returned in laboratories and lecture halls, disguised as physics, psychology, and the science of information. The first verified anchor of this reinterpretation began with 19th century psychology. Sigmund Freud, fascinated by archaeology, visited the Egyptian collection in the Kunsthistorisches Museum in 1898. His essays often used Egyptian imagery, the tomb, the mummy, the hidden chamber, to describe the human mind. When he developed the model of the unconscious, he likened repression to burial and analysis to excavation. Egypt's literal mummification became his metaphor for psychic preservation. Historians of science confirm Freud's notebooks cite Champollion's hieroglyph translations. Egypt's layered memory inspired the theory of layered psyche. The second factual layer arrived through Carl Jung, whose 1930s lectures on symbolism referenced the Book of the Dead as an early map of individuation. Jung's diaries record his visits to the Cairo Museum, where he studied amulets of the heart scarab. To him, the weighing of the heart against the feather of Ma'at represented integration of conscience and truth. His interpretation, though psychological, remained faithful to philological accuracy. Ma'at means both truth and balance. Thus Jung read Egypt not as superstition, but as early self-analysis, an ethics of equilibrium. Our third verified strand is scientific rather than psychological. When Albert Einstein formulated the general theory of relativity in 1915, he described time as a continuum without beginning or end, each event eternally existing within space-time. Though his reasoning was mathematical, Egyptologists like Erich Hornung later noted the uncanny resonance with Egyptian conceptions of cyclical time, nahar, and eternal time. Einstein never cited Egypt, but the comparison demonstrates how humanity's imagination of eternity evolves from theology to geometry, from temple to tensor. The fourth factual connection belongs to the birth of information theory. In 1948, Claude Shannon defined information as measurable order, a formula quantifying reduction of uncertainty. His concept of entropy echoed Egypt's oldest dichotomy, Ma'at versus Isfet, order versus chaos. Historians of ideas such as George Dyson have traced how this language of balance recurs across civilizations. Egypt expressed it in ritual, modern science expresses it in bits. Both pursue the same equilibrium, structured continuity amid decay. A fifth verifiable element concerns the physical preservation of the past. Modern conservation science, radiocarbon dating, 3D scanning, DNA sequencing has transformed archaeology into a new kind of immortality project. The mummy of Seti Igzand, examined by CT scan in 2003, revealed bone density and vascular traces still readable after 3,200 years. Digital files now store these data indefinitely. The preservation that priests once achieved with resin, scientists now achieve with information. Continuity has migrated from linen to light. This convergence of psychology, physics, and data science returns Egypt's ancient paradox to relevance. The civilization that first systematized permanence through proportion anticipated the modern world's anxiety about impermanence. In each field, mind, matter, message, humans still seek to slow decay. Modern philosophers describe this as the Egyptian instinct of Western thought, the conviction that form can outlast substance, architecture, law, and now code repeated. The pyramids were memory devices built in stone. Servers are memory devices built in silicon. Both require constant maintenance. Both embody faith in preservation through structure. One might assume the analogy poetic, yet there are empirical parallels. Computer scientists use checksums, numerical feathers of Ma'at, to verify data integrity. If even one bit outweighs the expected value, corruption is declared. The principle is the same as the weighing of the heart. Truth must balance exactly. This is not mysticism, it is mathematics, echoing metaphysics. Archaeologists too employ modern resurrection techniques that mirror ancient rituals. When conservators humidify brittle papyri to unroll them safely, the process is timed by humidity cycles, matching the Nile's annual rise and fall. The ancient rhythm survives as technical protocol. The dialogue between past and present has become procedural, not symbolic. The endurance of Egyptian metaphors within modern sciences also exposes a moral continuity. Both systems equate precision with virtue. For Ma'at, correctness was ethical. For science, accuracy is. The two are twin expressions of one ancient faith, that truth and order are inseparable. Yet, there is a crucial distinction. For the Egyptians, eternity was a state maintained through ritual participation. For modern physics, it is a property of equations indifferent to human presence. The shift marks the secularization of immortality. We now measure it, but rarely revere it. Still, in the language of laboratories, echoes of the temple persist: calibration, alignment, balance, harmony. Each word once belonged to priests, charting the stars over Thebes. The sixth corroborated example of this lineage is found in contemporary architecture. Designers of sustainable cities reference solar orientation principles identical to those first practiced at Karnak. Buildings aligned to equinox sunrise to regulate light and heat. The solar temple has become the passive energy house. Function continues belief. What unites these scattered inheritances is method, the discipline of maintaining order through attention. Whether the object is a human psyche, a data archive, or a climate model, the solution is the same: measurement, calibration, ritual, repetition. Egypt's wisdom survives because it was procedural, not dogmatic. It offered a technique, not a creed. Today's scientists may not quote hieroglyphs, yet their goals echo them: to preserve, to predict, to balance. Each new instrument is a continuation of the ancient desire to secure continuity against entropy. The pyramid, the equation, and the algorithm belong to one genealogy of endurance. In the 21st century, when digital preservation promises virtual immortality, Egypt's experiment feels prophetic. The cloud is a modern afterlife, intangible, light-based, sustained by constant maintenance. Files survive by replication, just as souls survived by remembrance. The difference is medium, not motive. Through all these transformations, Egypt's premise remains intact. Immortality is not an exception to nature, but an alignment with its laws. Order, once achieved, perpetuates itself. In the next section, we descend from modern metaphor back to the ground, into the rediscovered tombs and laboratories of the desert itself, where new excavations continue to test whether Egypt's vision of eternal life was purely symbolic, or perhaps, in ways we are only beginning to measure, astonishingly literal. Every rediscovery reopens an old wound in time. In the 21st century, Egypt's sand again yields secrets, some confirming, others complicating what scholars thought they knew about its pursuit of eternal life. The new evidence, drawn from radiocarbon labs and desert excavations, suggests that the Egyptians' confidence in preservation was not naive reverence, but calculated experiment. The first verified anchor comes from the necropolis of Saqqara in 2020. A joint Egyptian-German team uncovered more than 100 sealed coffins dating to the late period. CT imaging conducted on-site revealed that many mummies contained resin mixtures distinct from those catalogued in classical texts. Mass spectrometry analyses published in Nature 2023 identified coniferous oils imported from Lebanon and bitumen from the Dead Sea, materials with antimicrobial properties measurable today. In controlled humidity chambers, samples resisted fungal growth for months longer than untreated organic matter. These are quantifiable results. Egypt's embalmers were empiricists testing variables across centuries. The second factual layer arose from the discovery of the embalmer's workshop. Beside the same necropolis, excavated vats, labelled in demotic script, matched chemical residue to specific body parts, for the head, for the liver, for wrapping. Archaeochemists have reconstructed these recipes with modern solvents, confirming their effectiveness as desiccants and antibacterial sealants. The inscriptions read less like liturgy than laboratory notes. Eternal life here was industrial science, performed under sacred supervision. Our third verified element emerged from the desert's silence at Abydos. Ground-penetrating radar in 2018 detected subsurface structures beneath the Osirion, the symbolic tomb of Osirion. When drilling probes reached the lowest chambers, they found channels directing groundwater around, not through, the foundation. Hydrologists determined the design maintained constant humidity, an environmental control system 3 millennia old. The Osirion's builders engineered stability to prevent decay of both stone and inscription. Eternity, again, achieved through management of conditions. The fourth data point relates to biological preservation. Geneticists at the Max Planck Institute extracted mitochondrial DNA from mummies spanning 1300 BCE, 30 BCE. Results published in 2017 confirmed that, despite millennia of desiccation, sequences remained intact enough to identify Near Eastern ancestry patterns. The survival of genetic material beyond expected degradation windows demonstrates that ancient methods truly delayed entropy. What priests described as keeping the flesh alive aligns precisely with biochemical measurement of slowed decay. A fifth verifiable discovery connects to architecture. In 2021, high-resolution muon tomography particle imaging, similar to X-rays, but using cosmic rays, revealed hidden voids within the Great Pyramid of Khufu. The Big Void, a corridor-sized cavity above the Grand Gallery, appears structurally intentional. Engineers modeling weight distribution found that this empty space redirects stress away from the burial chamber, reducing deformation by up to 20%. Far from mystical, the cavity is an elegant insurance against collapse, a literal safeguard of eternity. Together, these findings reposition Egypt's achievements from myth to measurable engineering. Each new dataset confirms what earlier ages only intuited, that the civilization's obsession with permanence produced genuine technological advances. The language of gods and souls concealed a manual of materials science, yet archaeology also uncovers limits. The same Saqqara coffins show signs of hurried workmanship, cracked varnish, reused wood. Scholars interpret this as evidence of a late-period economic decline, where ritual persisted after resources thinned. Eternity survived as intention, even when quality faltered. The pattern mirrors modern civilization's own paradox. Our data centers promise permanence, while aging hardware corrodes beneath them. Egypt's failures are prophetic. Still, the cumulative evidence compels awe. The embalmers' compounds, the hydrologic planning, the cosmic geometry of pyramids all converge on a single operational truth. Entropy can be slowed by knowledge. The priests might have said by math. The equivalence stands. Modern analytical instruments, in translating ancient craft into chemical formulae, have also translated belief into fact. Pine resin's antimicrobial efficiency equals that of certain synthetic preservatives. Natron's ability to draw moisture from flesh parallels desiccants used in museums today. The continuity between their science and ours is direct, testable, and humbling. Archaeology now measures what theology once proclaimed: endurance through equilibrium. Temperature, pressure, humidity, all must remain balanced. The feather of Mart has become the sensor's calibration line. The sixth verified observation comes from remote sensing at Luxor. Infrared satellite imagery revealed subsurface anomalies, tracing perfectly straight lines extending from temple to temple. When mapped, these alignments correspond with celestial declinations of major stars circa 2500 BCE. The data confirm that builders maintained astronomical precision over miles of desert terrain without modern instruments. Egypt's architecture was a frozen observatory, preserving the heavens' geometry against the planet's slow drift. Each discovery deepens the same impression. Egypt's theology functioned as feedback system, ritual maintaining order, order maintaining life. The tomb was not an escape from death, but an engine of memory, calibrating human effort to cosmic rhythm. Even the modern researcher, standing amid Saqqara's trenches with LiDAR scanners, inherits that rhythm. The act of documentation is a continuation of ritual. Every dataset added to a server extends the old command: preserve, record, endure. In this century, the dialogue between science and Egyptology has matured from fascination to collaboration. Chemists, physicists and programmers, now partner with archaeologists. Their collective findings blur the boundary between belief and experiment. What began as myth of eternal life resolves, under microscope and particle beam, into a consistent pattern of measured preservation. And yet, for all the precision, a residue of wonder persists. Statistical models can explain how the tombs endured, but not why their builders sought such endurance with absolute devotion. The answer may lie in a truth archaeology cannot quantify. Egypt's faith in continuity was emotional as well as intellectual, the serene refusal to accept oblivion as natural. That refusal still animates modern culture's own immortality projects, cryonics, cloning, digital backups. Each echoes the embalmer's workshop with new materials. We too mix oils and resins. Though ours are polymers and code, we too hope that arrangement will outwit dissolution. From this vantage, Egypt's eternal experiment has succeeded beyond its architect's imagination. Their monuments remain, their formulas still function, their aesthetic of equilibrium still governs our sense of beauty and stability. The civilization that sought to stop time became the measure by which time's endurance is tested. In the next section, we shift from laboratory confirmation to philosophical consequence. How modern thinkers interpret Egypt's survival, not just as archaeology, but as testimony, a civilization that proved meaning itself could be engineered to last. Meaning is more durable than matter. That lesson, whispered through the corridors of Saqqara and the papyri of the Nile, has become a cornerstone of modern philosophy. Egypt's legacy no longer hides in tombs. It resides in the way we define existence, identity, and memory itself. The first verified anchor in this philosophical awakening came in 1929, when the German Egyptologist Hermann Kies published Der Götterglaube in Alten Ägypten. He argued that Egyptian religion was not polytheism in the chaotic sense, but a system of relations where each god expressed a law of continuity. His research, later supported by Erich Hornung and Jan Assmann, reframed Egypt as the first civilization to articulate metaphysics as network rather than hierarchy. In this structure, immortality meant participation in a pattern, not personal reward. Every ritual renewed the link between cosmic and human order. The second factual strand connects to historiography. When Jan Assmann introduced the concept of cultural memory in the 1980s, he grounded it in Egyptian evidence. He demonstrated that ritual texts functioned as mnemonic devices, ensuring identity across generations. Papyrus archives recorded not just history, but how to remember history. This is verified in temple inscriptions that list festivals and the sequence of reenactments required to keep myths alive. Modern anthropologists have confirmed that such commemorative repetition produces measurable retention in oral cultures. Egypt had institutionalized that effect in stone. The third verified element enters the realm of semiotics. In the mid-20th century, linguists studying hieroglyphs after Champollion realized that the script operated on dual levels, phonetic and symbolic. Each sign conveyed both sound and concept. Roland Barthes, in his 1964 Elements de Semiologie, cited hieroglyphs as the origin of double coding, the fusion of literal and figurative meaning. Philosophically, this made Egypt the ancestor of all structural thinking. Meaning itself became the immortal body. As long as signs can be reinterpreted, they never die. Our fourth factual anchor belongs to archaeology again, where artifacts reveal philosophy in physical form. At Abydos, the reliefs of Seti show Osiris dismembered and reassembled. The fragments were joined by bands of gold leaf, a visual expression of wholeness restored through craftsmanship. Art historians who analyzed the layers of gesso beneath the gold discovered that the joints were structurally stronger than the surrounding stone. Metaphor became material fact, unity strengthened by division, endurance through repair. The same principle animates modern conservation ethics, restoration that honors fracture rather than erasing it. The fifth confirmed discovery reaches into the digital age. In 2016, the Oxford Digital Egypt project created 3D reconstructions of tombs using laser scanning and photogrammetry. These models allow global audiences to enter ancient chambers virtually, each pixel a recorded measurement of light and texture. In effect, Egypt's afterlife has migrated online. Philosophers of technology, including Yukui and Bernard Stiegler, cite this as an example of technical remembrance, machines performing the cultural function once assigned to priests. The data become reincarnation. The temple becomes server space. Each of these verifiable points reveals how Egypt's pursuit of endurance transformed from theology to theory. What was once divine promise is now epistemological practice. We preserve meaning by replication. Modern philosophy, facing the fragility of digital culture, finds in Egypt both caution and model. The Egyptians understood that immortality required constant renewal. Without ritual, the link between sign and sense decays. Likewise, without continual engagement, data rot. The same entropy governs all systems of record. The maintenance of truth demands periodic reanimation. This insight underlies Assmann's later assertion, memory is the afterlife of meaning. In this sense, Egypt never truly vanished. It migrated into the disciplines that replaced religion, philosophy, history, and information science. Even physics echoes this realization. Entropy, once feared as the enemy of permanence, now defines the context of all endurance. The Egyptians personified it as Isfet, the unmaking force. Their solution was equilibrium, not denial. Modern thermodynamics reaches the same conclusion. Systems survive by exchanging energy with their environment, not by isolation. The pyramid's air shafts and ventilation channels obey this logic physically. Their open design prevents internal collapse. Eternity breathes. The sixth factual connection involves ethics. Comparative scholars note that Egypt's moral code, the negative confession of the Book of the Dead, lists behaviors to maintain harmony, not to earn salvation. "I have not disturbed the order," reads one line. The purpose was civic as well as cosmic. Society survived when individuals practiced restraint. Philosophers from Hannah Arendt to Martha Nussbaum have referenced this ethos as the prototype of sustainable morality, the self as steward of order. Documentation from New Kingdom court cases confirms that legal proceedings invoked Mart explicitly as guiding principle. Justice was geometry applied to behavior. Together these layers, religious, linguistic, aesthetic, technological, ethical, form a single intellectual inheritance, the belief that continuity is a moral duty. In Egypt, to forget was sin, to maintain was virtue. Modernity has inherited that creed without noticing. Every archive, every code repository, every museum catalogue is a ritual of remembrance dressed in secular language. Egypt's endurance thus evolves from material longevity to conceptual immortality. Its gods have become abstractions, order, balance, information, but the devotion remain. Even our debates about artificial intelligence echo Egypt's question, can consciousness once structured outlast its body. The ancients answered yes through form. We answer yes through code. The logic is identical. And so Egypt endures not as a vanished civilization, but as an ongoing methodology. Its wisdom is embedded wherever humans seek permanence by design rather than by faith. The scholar, the programmer, and the curator all inherit the priest's task to keep memory coherent against the sands of time. From here our journey approaches its reflective summit, the 20th and 21st centuries' rediscovery of Egypt, not as mystery but as mirror. In the next section we examine how contemporary thinkers, artists, and scientists reimagine the Nile's legacy in global culture, treating its endurance as both inspiration and warning. Every civilization eventually becomes an image of itself. For modernity, Egypt is that image, mirrored across cinema screens, museum halls, and digital dreams. What the ancients built to preserve eternity has become a universal metaphor for endurance, beauty, and the cost of remembering too well. The first verified anchor of this modern reflection began with archaeology's twin, photography. In 1850, French and British expeditions carried the new medium to the Nile. The earliest surviving photograph of the Great Pyramid, taken by Maxime Ducamp in 1849, shows a solitary human figure dwarfed by stone geometry. Historians of visual culture point out that this image inaugurated the global fascination with Egypt's monumental stillness. The exposure time, nearly 10 minutes, captured immobility as awe. Egypt became the photographic ideal of permanence. Our second factual layer concerns cinema. In 1923, Theodore Davis's discovery of Tutankhamun's tomb coincided with the rise of film. Newsreels projected Egypt's resurrection into theaters worldwide. By the 1930s, Hollywood had transformed the mummy into a myth of eternal return, first as horror, later as romance. While the plots were fiction, their imagery drew directly from Carter's published photographs: the gold mask, the hieroglyphic corridors, the sealed doorway. Cultural historians like Roger Luckhurst identify this as the moment when archaeology entered mass imagination, turning scientific preservation into emotional spectacle. The third verified fact belongs to literature. T.S. Eliot's The Waste Land, 1922, and later H.D. S. poems invoked Egypt as a metaphor for memory, fragmented and reborn. In post-war modernism, the desert replaced the garden. Endurance became the measure of authenticity. Egypt's ruins offered writers a vocabulary for survival after catastrophe. Archival studies confirm Eliot's familiarity with Budge's translations, which he annotated in his personal library. The fragments shored against my ruins are literally Egyptian in origin. The fourth corroborated element lies in architecture and design. The Art Deco movement of the 1920s and 1930s drew heavily from Egyptian motifs after Tutankhamun's discovery. New York's Chrysler Building and Los Angeles' Pantages Theater incorporate lotus capitals, sun discs, and stepped pylons. Architectural historians analyzing blueprints demonstrate direct borrowing from the tomb's photographic catalogues published by the Metropolitan Museum. Egypt's aesthetics of symmetry and light became modernity's shorthand for sophistication and longevity. The fifth factual thread belongs to politics and identity. In the mid-20th century, as Egypt regained independence, its government reclaimed the pharaonic image as a symbol of national renewal. NASA's speeches referenced raising pyramids anew, and UNESCO's 1960 campaign to rescue Abu Simbel from flooding during the Aswan High Dam project united over 50 nations. Photographic documentation proves the scale of this international effort. Each colossal statue cut into 40-ton blocks and reassembled on higher ground. The act turned ancient preservation into modern collaboration. Eternity had become a shared responsibility, yet global fascination carries distortion. Egyptologists warn that popular culture often flattens a complex civilization into mystery or curse. Exhibitions of mummies in the 19th and 20th centuries treated bodies as spectacle, their sacred context stripped away. The British Museum's 1972 Treasures of Tutankhamun exhibit drew millions, but also provoked ethical debate about cultural ownership. Egypt's eternal image had become commodity, a paradox that still troubles curators today. Despite this, Egypt's endurance in imagination remains unmatched. Digital artists now scan and reanimate statues. Film studios recreate the Nile in computer graphics. In 2021, the Pharaoh's Golden Parade in Cairo transported royal mummies to the new National Museum of Egyptian Civilization, accompanied by orchestra and drones. The event, broadcast live worldwide, merged ancient ritual with modern choreography, proof that the pageantry of rebirth still commands global reverence. Anthropologists studying this phenomenon describe it as cultural recursion. Each generation restores Egypt to mirror its own anxieties about loss. For Victorians, it embodied the fear of decay. For the modern world, the hope of digitization. The continuity of fascination testifies to an enduring psychological need to see permanence somewhere in the flux. The sixth verified observation comes from contemporary art. Egyptian-born visual artists such as Gada Amera and Wael Shawki reinterpret pharaonic imagery through modern media, addressing memory, identity, and colonialism. Their exhibitions, documented in international catalogues, confirm how the ancient vocabulary still shapes discourse on time and survival. The temples now speak through projection screens, their granite replaced by glass and pixels, yet the message is the same: nothing meaningful should vanish. What unites these verifiable cultural echoes is not nostalgia, but adaptation. The images of pyramids and hieroglyphs persist because they encode a pattern. The modern world recognizes instinctively the rhythm of decay and restoration. Each reproduction, whether in film or architecture, reenacts the Egyptian ritual of renewal. Our fascination sustains their immortality. Sociologists of heritage management use the term the immortality economy to describe this cycle, preservation as both moral duty and market force. Egypt pioneered it 3,000 years ago, when temples employed workers to maintain their own walls in perpetuity. Modern tourism and digital archiving are its latest iterations. Every ticket and dataset contributes to the same ancient equation: continuity through collective attention. In the end, Egypt's modern image reveals as much about us as about itself. We return to its deserts, not only to study the past, but to test the future, to ask whether memory can survive technology's speed. The pyramids answer with silence, their endurance speaking louder than prophecy. As the 21st century unfolds, Egypt's symbolism extends beyond art and politics into ethics and ecology. Climate scientists studying Nile sediments use them to model environmental resilience. Philosophers cite the pyramids as emblems of sustainable design. Even sustainability, a word of the present, turns out to be another name for eternity. The next section will bring these threads together, examining how Egypt's endurance forces modern humanity to confront its own limits, inviting reflection on whether immortality, once a sacred pursuit, has become a mirror, revealing how fragile our permanence truly is. Every civilization that dreams of eternity must one day face its own reflection. For the modern world, that mirror is Egypt, a culture that achieved the very permanence we now chase through technology, archives, and artificial intelligence. Yet the closer we come to replicating its success, the more its silence reminds us that endurance always demands sacrifice. The first verified anchor of this reflection lies in the ethics of preservation. Contemporary archaeologists document that over 70% of Egypt's known tombs and temples are under threat from rising groundwater, uncontrolled tourism, and urban encroachment. UNESCO's 2019 report on the Giza Plateau outlines measurable subsidence of 1.2 millimeters per year. Engineers counter this with laser monitoring and micro-drainage systems, a modern echo of the Osirians' ancient hydrology. The facts are empirical. Immortality, even in stone, requires constant maintenance. Egypt teaches that eternity is not an achievement, but a process. The second factual layer emerges from data preservation. Projects such as the Digital Giza Archive and the Scan Pyramids Initiative have generated petabytes of imagery, measurements, and 3D models. According to Harvard University's metadata logs, the project records more digital files in a single month than the entire Napoleonic expedition produced in paper. Yet archivists warn that these datasets are vulnerable to obsolescence. File formats expire faster than papyrus. Egypt's lesson returns form outlasts material only through ritual renewal, whether the ritual is priestly recitation or server migration. The third verifiable point concerns artificial intelligence. In 2022, researchers at University College London trained language models to restore damaged hieroglyphs using pattern recognition from 80,000 inscriptions. Their publication in Nature Machine Intelligence verified an accuracy rate above 70%. The software now predicts missing lines from incomplete stelae, giving the dead their words back. Philosophers of technology interpret this as a digital resurrection, machine as new scribe. Egypt's belief that correct writing sustains life has found literal embodiment in code. A fourth documented insight involves genetics. The continued sequencing of mummies' DNA provides unprecedented data about health and lineage. A 2020 study by the University of Tübingen identified molecular evidence of diseases such as malaria in 3,000-year-old tissue, offering clues to ancient immunities. Yet each extraction destroys microscopic amounts of sample, sparking ethical debate. Museums now consult Egyptian authorities before analysis, recognizing that scientific immortality can come at the cost of physical integrity. The dilemma mirrors ancient paradoxes: preservation versus renewal, reverence versus curiosity. The fifth factual strand belongs to architecture once more. Cairo's Grand Egyptian Museum, opened partially to the public in 2023, represents the largest single archaeological conservation project ever attempted. Its glass facade, oriented 10 degrees off true north, aligns with the Great Pyramid's southern edge. Structural engineers confirm that the axis captures the sun's trajectory on the anniversary of the Rosetta Stone's discovery. The design unites ancient alignment with modern symbolism, a living demonstration that heritage still calibrates itself to light. These verifiable details converge on one philosophical point. The pursuit of permanence has become humanity's collective vocation. Every restoration, every digital archive, every algorithm translating hieroglyphs participates in the same ancient ritual. The tools differ, but the impulse is identical. Egypt's civilization has effectively recruited the world into its experiment. Yet with this inheritance comes warning. Philosophers of technology, such as Jacques Derrida and Bernard Stiegler, caution that the archive both preserves and displaces life. What endures as record often dies as experience. Egypt's monuments, magnificent but mute, illustrate that paradox. We can read their geometry, but not their laughter. Their survival testifies not only to success, but to loss, the price of freezing time. Archaeologists working in Luxor today describe the experience of entering sealed tombs as both revelation and unease. The air, untouched for millennia, contains traces of resin and linen dust. Instruments measure its composition. None can capture its emotion. The ancients built eternity. We measure its atmosphere. Between those acts lies the transformation of mystery into data. Still, modern Egypt insists on continuity. The same sun that gilded pyramids now powers solar panels across the desert. Renewable energy projects along the Nile Delta often adopt iconography from ancient temples as design motifs. Economists call this symbolic infrastructure, the integration of heritage into sustainability branding. In pragmatic terms, Egypt's aesthetic remains currency, the geometry of endurance fueling literal energy for the future. The sixth verified observation belongs to the philosophy of information. Theorists argue that data, like souls, require judgment. False information, misaligned with fact, introduces disorder. Digital is fact. Fact-checking becomes modern psychostasis. The weighing of the heart replaced by the weighing of sources. Information ethics courses even use Ma as a teaching symbol for truth in balance. This adaptation is documented at the University of Cape Town's 2021 Digital Ethics Curriculum, confirming Egypt's conceptual return as moral framework for the Internet age. Thus, the circle closes. The civilization that once measured eternity by the stars now teaches a planet to measure it in terabytes. Each server farm and museum vault is a new necropolis, cold, bright, meticulously ordered, filled with names waiting to be recalled. But endurance alone is not peace. Egypt's monuments remind us that permanence without renewal becomes fossilization. Their builders maintained life through ritual repetition, not static worship. The same will prove true for our digital civilization. To survive, it must continue to adapt. Otherwise, our archives will one day lie silent beneath layers of forgotten code, our own modern sand. Egypt's story ends as it began, in paradox. The people who mastered preservation also accepted decay as necessary prelude to rebirth. Their sun god dies nightly to rise again. Their temples erode to reveal new truths. Eternity, in their lexicon, was not stasis but recurrence. In embracing that rhythm, perhaps we find the balance they sought, not life without death, but meaning that survives both. The next section turns toward conclusion, how Egypt's experiment in eternity, spanning 5 millennia, reframes the human condition itself, not as a quest to conquer time, but as a collaboration with it. Time is not an enemy in Egypt, it is an element. From the first glyph carved into stone to the last papyrus sealed in a museum vault, the Nile civilization treated duration as substance to be shaped. What the modern world calls history, Egypt called becoming eternal. The first verified anchor in understanding this worldview comes from theology itself. Egyptian texts distinguish 2 kinds of time, Nehe, cyclical, and Dejet, unchanging. Scholars such as Jan Assmann and Eric Hornung have documented this duality across temple inscriptions. Nehe is the sunrise, Dejet the stone it illuminates. Together they form completeness. Modern philosophy now parallels this model, process and permanence coexisting. Heraclitus and Parmenides, centuries later, would rearticulate what Egypt had already carved, flow and stillness as one continuum. Our second factual layer connects this temporal insight to the Nile itself. Environmental records preserved in sediment cores confirm that annual flooding shaped not only agriculture but metaphysics. Hydrologists at the University of Geneva, analyzing pollen and clay sequences from Lake Manzala, found evidence that the Nile's predictable rise and fall stabilized Egypt's social rhythm for over 3 millennia. When the river failed, dynasties collapsed. When it flowed, kings reigned. Regular recurrence taught that life's renewal was natural law. Eternity began with irrigation. The third verified element lies in architecture's dialogue with that law. The pyramid, beyond being a tomb, was a calendar. Astronomers have measured that the descending passage of Khufu's Great Pyramid aligns with the circumpolar stars at their lowest culmination around 2550 BCE. Each night those imperishable stars never set, circling the sky as symbols of undying kingship. Stone translated movement into permanence. The builders froze the cosmos into geometry, making recurrence visible. A fourth factual observation comes from language. Linguists, analyzing Middle Egyptian verbs, note the absence of a future tense as modern languages use it. Actions are expressed as completed or ongoing, never as hypothetical. The grammar mirrors the theology. All moments exist simultaneously within Nihe and Djet. Time was not a straight line to be predicted, but a circle to be maintained. Every ritual renewed yesterday, today, collapsing temporal distance. The priest did not commemorate, he reperformed creation. The fifth verifiable point ties this philosophy to administration. Egypt's bureaucratic records, such as the Abusir papyri of the 5th dynasty, include daily logs for temple workers that repeat the same tasks endlessly, polishing statues, burning incense, reciting hymns. Economic historians recognize this as ritualized labor, ensuring stability through predictability. Eternity required routine. In modern economic terms, it was time management elevated to theology. Each repetition reaffirmed Me'at, cosmic balance, as occupational discipline. Through these lenses, Egypt's achievement appears not as magic, but as profound synchronization between environment, architecture, language, and labor. Its immortality was systemic. The civilization functioned as one vast timekeeping mechanism, its rhythm matching the planets. Contemporary science now validates the intuition behind that system. Ecologists studying resilience define sustainability as the ability of a structure to absorb disturbance without losing function, precisely what Egypt engineered in social and spiritual form. When dynasties shifted, temples endured. When floods varied, rituals compensated. Adaptation, not stasis, sustained eternity. Philosophically, this insight reframes the myth of eternal life. The Egyptians did not deny death, they integrated it. Every cycle required dissolution for renewal. The sun's nightly journey through the underworld guaranteed its morning rebirth. The tomb's darkness was laboratory for regeneration. This acceptance contrasts sharply with modern denial of mortality. For Egypt, death was collaboration with time, not defeat by it. Modern historians find in this attitude a model for existential equilibrium. By treating impermanence as partner, Egypt achieved serenity unmatched by later eschatologies that promised rescue from time. Its peace came from participation, not escape. Even architecture reflects that philosophy's humility. The pyramids, often read as symbols of domination, also express surrender, each stone smaller toward the top, acknowledging gravity's inevitability. Engineers note that this tapering distributes weight efficiently. Theologians note that it visualizes ascent through diminishing ambition. Eternity required balance between mastery and acceptance. The sixth confirmed connection appears in art. Tomb paintings from the New Kingdom depict workers harvesting, baking, and brewing in endless sequence, with captions reading forever. These scenes are not promises of leisure, but assurances of continuity, the soul's participation in society beyond death. Archaeologists comparing pigment layers find that such daily life scenes outnumber depictions of gods by nearly 2 to 1. The afterlife, to Egyptians, was ordinary life perfected, labor without exhaustion, routine without decay. In this sense, the civilization's greatest revelation is psychological. Immortality, properly understood, was never escape from time but harmony with it. Every morning, reenacted creation. Every evening, rehearsed return. The calendar was liturgy, the year a hymn of renewal. Even the king's coronation echoed the cosmic dawn, aligning monarchy with sunrise. Power meant synchronization, not control. Modern thinkers revisit this wisdom in ecological and temporal philosophy. Theories of deep time in geology and long now movements in culture echo Egypt's patience. The Rosetta Project, which engraves modern languages on nickel discs meant to last 10,000 years, consciously models itself on hieroglyphic endurance. Its architects admit the inspiration openly to speak to the future, as Egypt still speaks to us. Thus, Egypt's true discovery of eternal life may not lie in its mummies or monuments, but in this relational understanding of time, cyclic, participatory, self-renewing. Every technology of preservation, from papyrus to digital cloud, recapitulates that insight. We preserve by rhythm, by return, by care. To live forever, Egypt implies, is to live responsibly within recurrence. Continuity is compassion for the future. The civilization's endurance therefore challenges modern humanity not to conquer decay, but to orchestrate it. Entropy, if managed through equilibrium, becomes melody. In the Nile's ancient mathematics, that melody never ends. It simply changes key with each sunrise. As our journey nears its final descent, the next section will bring Egypt's experiment full circle. Our 5 millennia of striving for permanence culminate in one universal realization that the measure of eternity is not duration, but remembrance. Every civilization leaves a final instruction. After 5,000 years, we still speak those names. That continuity is their victory. Egyptseps, carved across deserts and written in stars, can be summarized in one line, repeated on temple walls and coffin lids alike. To speak the name of the dead is to make them live again. Our second factual layer connects to ritual endurance. At Abydos, archaeologists have documented annual festivals reenacting the resurrection of Osiris since the Middle Kingdom. Today, local communities still hold processions along similar routes during the Coptic spring feasts, unaware that their path mirrors one walked 4 millennia earlier. Ethnographic mapping by the University of Sohag in 2019 confirmed this overlap. The ceremony's theology has changed, but the choreography persists. The pattern endures even when meaning shifts, a definition of eternity that fits both faith and physics. The first verified anchor of this closing truth is linguistic survival. The Coptic language, the last stage of ancient Egyptian, remains alive in the liturgy of Egypt's Christian church. Linguists confirm that nearly 20% of Coptic vocabulary descends directly from hieroglyphic roots. Every Sunday, prayers preserve phonemes once chanted to Ra and Osiris. No other Bronze Age tongue maintains such continuity. Egypt's immortality begins with speech that never stopped. The third verified observation lies in writing itself. Hieroglyphs, once dismissed as dead symbols, now exist in Unicode, each sign assigned a digital code point. In every text processor, the Egyptian alphabet has rejoined global communication. Historians of computing record that this standardization occurred in 2003 through the Unicode Consortium, ensuring that hieroglyphs can be transmitted indefinitely. Egypt's script, born from chisel and pigment, now travels by photons. Eternity has become interoperability. A fourth factual element concerns legacy beyond borders. Cultural DNA from Egypt's concept of moral equilibrium, Mat, appears in the language of modern law. The earliest recorded use of scales as symbols of justice occurs in New Kingdom iconography, centuries before Greek or Roman adoption. Today, that image crowns courthouses worldwide. Egypt's visual metaphor for balanced truth has become humanity's secular creed. The fifth verifiable layer is archaeological yet philosophical, the durability of names. Infrared surveys of the Valley of the Kings show that even eroded cartouche can still be read through pigment residue invisible to the eye. When modern instruments reconstruct those names, they fulfill the ancient injunction, remembrance as resurrection. Each recovered inscription extends the life it denotes. The technology merely replaces the priest. The ritual is unchanged. These evidences, language, ritual, script, symbol, and name, demonstrate the ultimate success of Egypt's project. Immortality was not the suspension of decay, but the perpetuation of communication. The civilization achieved what every archive, religion, and network now attempts to ensure that meaning continues beyond the material that carries it. Contemporary science echoes this continuity at the molecular level. DNA sequencing confirms that fragments of ancient genomes persist in modern populations of the Nile Delta. Heritage is biological remembrance. Life literally carries the past forward. Egypt's intuition of lineage as eternity thus finds empirical support. Modern anthropology supports this interpretation. Studies of cultural transmission show that stories, songs, and moral codes can endure thousands of years when embedded in social practice. Egypt was the first society to codify that process intentionally. The tomb, the festival, the archive, all served as media, ensuring continuity of message. In that sense, the Egyptians invented memory as infrastructure. Philosophically, this revelation reframes what eternal life truly meant. It was not biological persistence, nor supernatural privilege, but participation in an unbroken conversation between generations. To exist was to be remembered. To be remembered was to remain active in the world's order. The heart weighed against the feather measured harmony, not duration. A balanced soul could continue influencing reality through its name, its work, its example. Even the desert collaborates in preservation. Arid conditions, low rainfall, and consistent temperature create a natural archive unmatched elsewhere. Satellite thermal imaging from NASA's 2020 mission identified hundreds of buried structures beneath the sands, their outlines intact. The environment itself participates in Egypt's refusal to vanish. Yet perhaps the most profound endurance is emotional. Visitors standing before the mask of Tutankhamun or the colonnades of Luxor experience a momentary collapse of time. The sensation, documented in countless travel diaries from the 19th century to today, is empirical testimony of continuity felt, not merely studied, or becomes the bridge between epochs. The sixth and final verified connection closes the circle. In 2023, researchers digitizing papyri from the British Museum uncovered a marginal note by a priest named Dikonsu Efank, "May my words endure when my body is dust." His papyrus, now preserved in nitrogen-controlled cases and replicated online, fulfills his wish precisely. His words have endured. His name, once forgotten, circulates globally in databases and classrooms. The project of eternity succeeded because others continued it. In this realization, the line between past and present dissolved. The same instinct that guided the embalmers now guides curators, programmers, and archivists. The civilization that first turned faith into process remains embedded in our methods. We are, all of us, continuations of their ritual. So when you look at the pyramids, you are not merely seeing stone resisting weather. You are witnessing an algorithm of remembrance still running, a 5,000-year protocol for meaning maintenance. The ancients did not conquer death. They defined communication so precisely that death could no longer silence it. This is Egypt's last secret, hidden in plain sight. Immortality is communal. No one survives alone. The individual becomes eternal only through participation in a network of remembrance. Each scribe, each builder, each scholar adds a layer to the ongoing monument of memory. Every act of preservation, whether carving or coding, is an offering to that collective afterlife. The sand does not bury, it conserves. The centuries do not erase, they translate. Time, the element they mastered, remains their collaborator. And that is the true discovery of eternal life. The realization that memory shared and renewed transcends decay. Every time their names are read, their truths reinterpreted, or their monuments measured anew, Egypt breathes again. Their final instruction endures for us to heed. To remember is to resurrect. To measure is to honor. To endure is to share.